Okay, so everyone rise, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So, we have approval of the agenda
I'll move to approve.
and no emergency modifications.
There is none.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's approved. And now we have the minutes of the regular meeting of April 19th. We need approval of that.
I'll move approval.
I'm actually just going to mention one thing. I did notice on the April 19th one that I had talked about featuring on the budget workshop.
Oh,
So I'll be bringing that up again when we talk about budget tonight.
okay. All right, perfect. So do we have a second for approval of the minutes? I'm abstaining. Oh, you weren't there, right?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Megan, we have a student representative.
Alright, so Nordoff News, there are just a few exciting weeks left of school. We are currently planning for staff appreciation where all staff members will receive the Paper Plate Award, spring showcase where students' work is on display, and the senior safe and sober grad night dinner and auction fundraisers take place. The 8th grade visit and senior rally on June 10th and grad night at Fantasia at June 15th. The Nordoff High School Music Department will be presenting its spring concert at Libby Gold next Friday, May 20th at 6:30 p.m. Recently back from an impressive showing in New Orleans, these award-winning ensembles will be presenting outstanding choral and instrumental music in this great outdoor venue. Matilla. This past Saturday, the Matilla Music Department traveled to Valencia on their spring trip after participating in the Music in the Park Festival. Students enjoy the rest of the day at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Thursday, May 19th from 6 to 8 p.m., Matilla hosts their annual spring celebration and 6th grade parent night. They begin at 6 p.m. with the general meeting in the Matilla Auditorium. Students will have a chance to visit all classrooms, see lots of projects and presentations, and listen to the talented Matilla musicians. Families can also enjoy incredible barbecue dinner prepared by the Ojai Rotary West. Each plate will be $7. Drinks, desserts, and popcorn will also be available. Leadership students will even be selling food beer floats. Miners Oaks. On Thursday, May 12th, Miners Oaks had their open house in Spring Fling. They had a barbecue dinner fundraiser, students' art was showcased, there was student performances, a silent auction, and a raffle. Miramonte. On Friday, May 20th, Miramonte will be having a family campout. This campout will have Cowboy John's Smokin' Barbecue and Dippin' Dots trucks serving dinner and dessert. Their open house will take place on Thursday, June 2nd. The art truck program will set up an art gallery to showcase the students' hard work. San Antonio. On Wednesday, May 5th, San Antonio will be having a Hawaiian Day, and the following day, May 26th, will be their open house. And Chaparral students will be going on a field trip to Cocoa Farms on Friday, June 10th.
Thank you. Very thorough. All right.
And we didn't, you're also, this Sunday night, I think, is the fundraiser also for the cafeteria stage. Is that not right? This Friday
Coconut
at
Grove fundraiser, yeah. Saturday night at the Women's Club.
the Women's Club.
Excellent.
Saturday night, sorry.
Thank you, Megan. I know you have homework. All right. One thing, I'd like to welcome all of our community members to our board meeting. This is wonderful to have you here. And I apologize for the confusion about the starting time of the meeting. We had a presentation by the UCLA Brain Sport program to talk to us about student athletes' concussions, and it was really informative, and we knew it was going to take a long time because there was a lot to discuss. So thank you for being patient and waiting for our meeting to start. So now we're on to public comments. If you have any public comments, you're certainly welcome to speak if you want to speak about a specific item. All right. Okay, we have some public comments. All right. So we start with Angie Janassi, our first speaker.
Oh darn, I was gonna work into it in my head.
Oh, well.
I guess not.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's great to see you guys. It's been like a month, it seems like. And I want to acknowledge all of my colleagues that are here tonight and joining me in support of OFT. It's great. Thanks. I have been thinking about this, and I want to come back to what I said, I think at the very first time I spoke to the board, and talk about making sure that you keep us a priority. I think that I know you think of us. I know you do. And yet, looking at budgets and looking at how we put everything together, I sometimes feel, and I think my colleagues feel, that while we're a priority and while we're important, we get pushed aside to take care of other issues. And I just wanted to say that I think it's really important that we don't get pushed aside. That our, as you can see, we have a new button, and teachers in Ojai Unified get paid 83% on the dollar that everybody else in the county gets. Did I say that right, Mary? Okay. So I think that's something to know, that that's very discouraging for us. And I guess I just want to make sure that when you're looking at the budget and you're approving the budget and you're doing what you guys do, that you help make this percentage go up instead of down. Because we were just talking about it today, and it's like, you know, if next year we don't get a raise, then we're going to be losing 2% because we're losing our 1% bonus, and we're going to be putting money into STIRS. And so not only are we not going to stay here, but we're going to drop this percentage down to, what did you say, 72% in the next few years, something like that? Something in there. So I guess that's all. I just want to make sure that we don't let this percentage drop, and that we go up and we get closer to where everyone else is. And I know that's difficult, but that's all. I just wanted to make sure that when you're approving things, you're asking the question, are you keeping the teachers, making sure that we're a priority?
Thank you. Any questions for Angie?
Are you gonna be here for later when we're talking about budget?
Yeah.
All right.
I just want to talk later.
Wendy Churchill. For some reason, our button isn't working, the timer, so
You will hear a different sound.
we'll hear a
this
different
evening.
sound, right? Okay.
I'm Wendy Churchill. First I want to say thank you for all your guys' hard work. I know you guys are here every month doing this, and I'm here for one meeting to address you guys. I want to speak today as a teacher and as a parent. I want to say that we've had a great experience with our daughters going through the school system. We have amazing staff, and they just put in so much extra personal time into that, and I appreciate it. So I wanted to say that. My purpose is, for speaking tonight, is also to let you know of my hope that you guys are going to work hard to close this gap that's getting bigger and bigger every year compared to our surrounding districts. And then my one concern I wanted to bring up as a parent is when thinking about that gap in pay, is for my kids and their education. They're going to be here for a while. I got a 6 and a 9-year-old, and I want to make sure that you guys are able to, sorry, I'm a little nervous, but that you're going to be able to continue to attract, retain, and hire qualified staff that want to be here and keep them for more than a year or two. They get their experience and move on. And I want more for that, more than that for my kids. So if you'll please take that into consideration while you guys are continuing with your hard work. Thank you.
Any questions for Wendy? Thank you, Wendy. Okay, we have Mervyn Ocker.
Good evening. I've been at this podium and talked to a lot of you in private conversations quite a bit. Appreciate what you guys do, and I understand the the challenges that OI Unified faces, whether it's with facilities or classroom sizes or teacher pay. But I really want us to focus on 10 years out when we're trying to hire and lure the newest teachers. Right now, with the average county settlement being somewhere around 5%, the gap that is currently 13% is going to expand. And it doesn't look like we're going to be able to make any meaningful progress unless we really do something to change the status quo. And in the out years, I realize our budget doesn't look so great, but in those out years, we can consider before we close the gap for the LCFF and reach the spending cap or the funding cap, we're really going to continue to fall further and further behind unless the school board and the teachers and the community all work together to do something big for this district. At a certain point, we're going to stop being able to hire the best talent. There's a drastic shortage. It's been in the news on NPR. All the news organizations are covering how few candidates are coming out with their teaching credential and how many are entering the teaching credential programs as young teachers. So as we know, and especially with OHI, our average teacher tenure right now is somewhere around 19 or 20 years in the district. We're very top heavy. And as those people who've been serving the district for so many years start to make their way toward retirement, it's going to be very difficult for this district to continue to lure the best and the brightest, especially in areas of need like special education, science, the maths. And without doing something about combination classes, we've got the higher rates of combination classes than anyone else in the county. I think currently we're at 12 or 13 combination classes. Higher student numbers in the classes. We're just going to be, on every aspect, we're just looking less and less desirable to these new candidates who are coming out. And as we need to go and fight and pull them into our district because we know they're not living in our district with real estate prices being so high and the affordability of OHI being so, or being able to afford a place in OHI. So it would be tough for a young teacher to come and work for this district. My wife and I are both in this district. My son is in this district. We really value the education and how hard the teachers work, but we are concerned about the future, and we really hope to work closely with the school board and the district leadership to change the course that we're on right now. So I appreciate your time, and thank you very much for listening to my comments.
Any questions from Irv?
I do. Mm-hmm. And this could go to any of you who have spoken. So believe me, you know, I won't just grandstand and say I, but I'm sure everyone at this table completely agrees that we want our teachers to be happy, and we want our teachers to be well compensated, and we want our schools to be vibrant and have great programs. My question back to you, and it's not going to be the question that you think it is. It's not going to be a ridiculous question. It's going to be a question broadly to say, please work with us on details soon. I know Jane had asked for a work session, or I think they call it a study session on budgets. But what we're talking about is $25 million, give or take, that we at the district level allocate, and the question is, how do we allocate it? And how do we do it to maximize the kinds of benefits that you talk about that make a great place for our kids, to not have huge classrooms, to have teachers getting paid enough that, one thing that's kind of nice is we are top heavy. As people retire, we bring in cheaper teachers, even if the schedule is going up.
That's true.
Which is good. But anyway, bottom line is, I as a board member ask your help.
Great.
And I am open-minded, and I will work hard to understand all the issues, and I've tried since I've been on the board. But I think we all recognize we're going to deal with an amount of money, a lot of millions of dollars that we then have to allocate. And how we allocate it is really the name of the game, right?
Absolutely, and I appreciate that comment, because I think if you reach out to teachers, I think what you've seen is there's a core of teachers that can volunteer and will be of service and work in the late hours on 7-11 commissions, working with the district leadership on a number of wide-ranging issues. Let us know what the OFT can do for you guys to help support your guys in the decision. If you need information, we've done our best to provide information. So please, we are serving this district, and that extends outside the classrooms to many sports fields, tennis tennis courts, swimming pools, it doesn't matter, we put in extra hours, every single one of us puts in extra hours. And so we're willing, the OFT is really willing to go above and beyond where we're at right now and to make Ohio Unified better. And I think that starts really by reaching out to the community, forming stronger relationships with the community, forming stronger relationships with the board, forming stronger relationships within our own union is really going to go a long ways to helping that. And any support that you can give us or any guidance that you can give us on what you guys can use teachers for, please let us know.
I think it's what you were saying, Kevin, makes it more, for me, rather than what can we do for you, let's reach out, it's more specific. If I were looking to cut my family budget, you know, I would say, oh, well, let's get rid of the movie channels, right? And everyone in my house would go, what? Not the movie channels. So, you know, if you guys see something that we might not see, say, you know, well, have we ever thought about getting rid of X? Maybe we haven't. I mean, Andy's certainly new, so he's doing that. I know. He's looked at things and said, well, we should change this. This costs too much. And so I think what you're asking, and if I'm wrong, stop me, but is the same thing. If you see that we're spending on something that you don't see the value in, or that you feel places a value on something besides yourself.
Sure. You know, after about 8 years of spending cuts and cutting to the bone and making class sizes so big, we really need to take a holistic approach. There isn't really a lot of fat left on that bone to trim until you start touching people's sacred cows. And really the only thing that's left to cut is you're going to hear a lot of community outpouring and concern. Everyone has a stake in this community and in this school district, and it really, from my point of view, I'd love to work with, love to get a number of teachers together and work with the board to find out where we can do those extra savings. We're talking, I think at this point, we're talking minuscule savings compared to the actual need for the district, so.
Say something? One, I think it goes back to what I had said at a prior meeting, where I do think we have to look at the budget, but I also think we have to look at being innovative. I think that's part of what I meant by that. It's not just innovative in our teaching, but innovative in how we bring kids in, how we increase attendance, how we use the money. And yeah, I do think that at some point it's going to hit sacred cows, and then we have to figure out what those are and what those are, and then how do they affect us, and are we willing, the teachers, the board, to come together to make some of those cuts, whatever they are, to increase pay and drop class size or whatever it is. But I think that's the first thing, and then the second thing is, do you want me to set up a meeting, or do you want to set up a meeting? Because I mean that. I'm completely excited about that idea, about us getting together and looking at this and figuring out what we can do. And I know that there are other people in OFT who would be very interested in doing that as well. And it's not just a point to you and say, you have to do it. I think we all have to do it. So, do you want me to set up a meeting with you, or do you want to set up a meeting?
Without getting out ahead of it,
We have to look at our schedule.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
And actually,
of course,
But
yeah.
also, I'd like to extend our thanks and gratitude both to Andy and Hank, who we've spent a lot of time with in the last months. They really have come to the table in the spirit of collaboration, transparency, and really appreciate working with both of you gentlemen. Thank you very
well,
much.
Hank has just reminded me that if we have a budget meeting, a special budget meeting, it would have to be this next Tuesday. Because as of June 7th, when we have our June 7th budget approval meeting,
Sure.
then the budget is set for next year. So
Well, let me
you guys can think about that and let us know.
Please reach out and invite me to any meetings that you think I can be attending.
Okay, thank you.
Linda? Can I
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to tack on to what Jane and Kevin were saying, and Angie as well, in terms of the innovation and creativity. I know we heard this out of 7-Eleven. We've heard it out of, a whole bunch of people. And at the last meeting, I even challenged Andy to do the same thing, right? And so in the spirit of fair play, I want to challenge the OFT as well. A SWAT team to find creative ways. Sacred cows may be sacred, but that doesn't mean that they have to be the same, right? And so this is that opportunity. And to speak to the very short threshold here, what that says is that we're talking about this too late, right, for this budget cycle. We need to start this now for the next budget cycle. We need to spend the next fiscal year finding and identifying those elements, because with a budget as tight as we're talking about, every dollar matters. And so if we can find ways of delivering the same services that we're doing now better or cheaper, then we need to be having those conversations. But in this kind of an environment, as you well know, nothing happens overnight.
Right, but it doesn't, I appreciate those comments. It's kind of, a lot of people who have been in the district a lot longer than me, and the demographic trends being known as the way they were, this tough decision, this conversations that started 4 years ago, 5 years ago. But we're here now with new leadership in the union. We're excited to be gaining more involvement within our union, and I think we're at a point where we can really come together as an as a school district. All the stakeholders come together and really figure out and tackle these tough questions together.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next person, Annika Forrester, about Language Access Project.
Thank you. I just wanted to, a little point of clarification. I made comments at the last meeting pointing out the Rotary grant that the Miners Oaks PTA got to purchase the interpretation devices that are now in use here at our board meeting. We've had steady attendance by Spanish speakers here, and at our last Miners Oaks PTA meeting, we had half of the room with Spanish speakers for the first time ever. So I mostly wanted to just, because it didn't end up in the minutes, point out that the district also kicked down for that purchase. The Rotary grant only funded at 60%, and so Andy was on it, and so I only wanted that to go on the record. Thank you so much. And if I didn't say it before, our intent is to share these with anybody who wants to use them or need them in the district. But I especially wanted to point out what a special privilege it has been to get to know you, Andy, and to work with you, and it's really wonderful. But to continue to build on that momentum, I also wanted to let anyone else know that to continue moving in this direction of a more inclusive future where barriers to language access are reduced and where inclusivity prevails, I wanted to let you know that we also submitted another grant, this time to the new Ojai Women's Fund. And the target for that grant is to acknowledge that the addition of technology isn't going to solve our communication challenges or our cultural divide, or more importantly, the achievement gap between native and English learning students. So our new grant seeks to affect culture change across the district, starting with Miners Oaks School. The objectives of the grant are to provide leadership training and professional development for parents as well as staff and administration around how to create inclusive, collaborative, multilingual meeting spaces where the language of the speaker is no longer a barrier to the language of the listeners, and where all voices are invited, encouraged, and heard. This grant specifies a number of different workshops targeting specific audiences and specific skill development. The partner we're hoping to work with is based in Santa Barbara. They're called Just Communities. And they've delivered their programs for many years now in many different school districts with a lot of success. And I have no doubt, should we be awarded the funds, that the experience here will be transformational. So I just wanted to let you know about that and ask you to cross your fingers for us. Thank you again, Andy, for just being on that and being responsive and your interest and for your support of this vision.
Great. Any questions for Annika? Thank you very much. That was great. All right. We have 3 people who would like to speak about school closure. You may do that now, or you may do that later when we get to that item. So the 3 people are Rachel Cannell, Rosa Martinez, and Sandra Contreras. So do you want to speak now, or would you like to speak later?
I'll speak right now.
Okay. And you're Rachel?
Yes, I'm Rachel.
Okay. There we go.
So, para iniciar this,
Oh,
There you go.
Yeah. So my name is, thank you so much for listening and being open and hearing us. We really appreciate you. My name is Rachel Connell, and this is my first year at San Antonio. I'm also from a native of South America, so I will be translating for our friends, my friends here. We all go to San Antonio together. We were all speaking and chatting and wanted to come, and they said, I'll go if you'll translate for me. And so I said, sure. So that's why we're here. This is my first year in the school district. My husband's from Ojai, I'm not, and he grew up and went to Topatopa. I've homeschooled and my children have gone to private schools. So this is my first year I have 4 boys. This is my first year with 3 boys in the school district. I have a 5th grader, a 3rd, a 2nd grader, and 1 coming into kindergarten. And so for me, one of the things I just wanted to express is what an easy transition it has been for us when we were looking at all the schools. And obviously my husband went to Topatopa and grew up here. But he was like, I really want something smaller. And that was his main concern. And so it has been a really easy transition for us. And I just wanted to express that because he was very wary about going from literally tiny or smaller, I should say, private schools and then homeschooling and then coming into the district. And so we actually went and toured different schools and really have, obviously it's been a good fit for us, San Antonio. And so I just wanted to express that to the board, so thank you.
Any questions for Rachel? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Sandra Contreras. La razón por la que vengo es porque me preocupé cuando escuché que hay la posibilidad de que la Escuela San Antonio sea cerrada.
So my name is Sandra Contreras, and I'm a parent at San Antonio. And the reason I wanted to be here tonight is because I became concerned when I heard that there was a possibility of San Antonio closing.
Tengo a mi hija de 8 años ahora cursando el 2º grado y el año pasado mi hijo se graduó del 6º grado ahí en la Escuela San Antonio. Y para el próximo año mi hija de 4 años de edad también asistirá.
I have an 8-year-old daughter right now who's in 2nd grade. My son graduated last year from 6th grade from San Antonio, and I have a 4-year-old who's coming into the pre-K program.
Mi hijo estuvo hasta el 3er grado en otra escuela y mi esposo y yo decidimos moverlo a la Escuela San Antonio porque nos queda muy cerca de donde vivimos y nos gusta mucho su horario.
So my son was attending another school in the valley. When he was in 3rd grade, we made the decision for him to go to San Antonio. There was a couple of reasons. One of them, we liked that it started earlier, el horario, ¿verdad? And the other one was because it is so close to where I live, my home.
Cuando mi hijo se cambió de escuela, él se puso muy triste porque dejó a sus amigos, pero en pocos días él se adaptó y nos dijo que se sentía muy feliz.
At first, my son was very sad to move because he had been at that other school from the beginning, but in a matter of days, he adapted very quickly. Está feliz, and he's very happy there.
Recuerdo cuando fui a hablar con la directora y ella me preguntó por qué yo quería mover a mi hijo de escuela. Y yo le contesté que estaba más cerca de mi casa y cuando pasaba por ahí veía a los niños muy activos y felices. Y en verdad lo son.
And when I met with the principal, and she asked me a very interesting question, she said, why do you want to move your child? Why do you want to move him from another school? Why do you want to move him here if he's doing well? And she said, well, I drive by this school every day as I leave because it's so close to my home. And the children are always so active and they seem so happy. And in fact, now I can attest that they really are.
Hasta el día de hoy puedo decir que mis hijos tienen buenos grados y los veo muy felices en la escuela. La directora, la secretaria, los maestros, todo el personal son muy amables. Me gustaría que la escuela San Antonio permaneciera abierta por muchos años.
Díganme el principio otra vez.
Hasta el día de hoy puedo decir que mis hijos tienen buenos grados.
So up till now, I can affirm and attest to you that my children have very good grades and are indeed very happy and have good friends there. And that the principal, the secretary in the office, and all of the teachers, the staff, have been wonderful with me.
Me gustaría que la escuela permaneciera abierta por muchos años porque considero que la escuela San Antonio es una excelente escuela. Gracias.
So I hope that San Antonio stays open for many more years because I consider it a very wonderful school. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. And this is Rosa?
I'm Rosa.
Okay, fine.
Well, I'm going to try to speak in English. I'm not too good, but if I got in trouble, she's going to help.
She can help you.
I'm going to
Yeah.
try. Well, thank you again. I have 3 boys, and my older one, he's 11, he's in 5th grade, and my second one, he's going to turn 9, and he's in 3rd grade, and I have he's going to turn 5, my little one, and he's going to San Antonio. He's so happy. He's so excited to now go with the other kids. My kids got up at 6 in the morning before I got up to get ready because they are so happy. They love their school. Everybody is like happy in San Antonio. I invite you, any of you, or to go and visit the campus and spend a day with the kids. You can ask I think any of the kids say, I love my teachers, I just love my school. Everybody, it's all the kids, any of the kids, I think. In my opinion, they're happy with the school. And when I hear something that the others saying for their own school, and I wanted to say for my school, my community, well, the ones we just speak Spanish or the Latin people, now we are more. When my older one started in San Antonio 6 years ago, we were 5% probably. Now we're growing more. What I wanted to say, we need a chance to tell you, we are here. We can help if there's anything to do now before start or with this mind thinking, oh, we're gonna close San Antonio. Just let us know, or we can make give some ideas, or invite people to participate more, and not just in one school. If we can do something for the others first, we can do for them and help our campus, the one which is our age of. I don't know if you all understand what I'm trying to say. ¿Qué podemos ayudar a nosotros a escuelas para que ellos también se mantengan abiertos? Porque Ohio está creciendo, nuestra comunidad hispana está creciendo y somos más. Ohio es más grande ahora que 20 años atrás cuando yo llegué.
She came here 20 years ago and she said, I can attest that Ohio, as far as Latin Americans are concerned, is growing. And so when you heard that when she first started taking her children there was just a few of them. Now there's a lot of Latin Americans. There's a couple of other moms that had to leave that came as well, that have children there and are having all of us, literally every single one of us that came tonight have kindergartners coming in. And she's saying that we would get behind whatever as Latin Americans to keep schools open, ¿verdad? Eso es lo que se está diciendo como latinos, que
podemos hacer algo,
whatever we can do to.
If there's any ideas or participate more, not just once. I feel kind of bad because I wasn't coming into one of these meetings, And I think I invite one, I did 2 phone calls before two just came, and the 2 persons I called, they came. So if we have more time, or we plan to do this or something else, we do all high day, we do this and that, we can do for just the schools.
Sí, nos podemos unir, es lo que está diciendo. That it's very easy for us to unite ourselves, I think, as Latin Americans or as Hispanics, because we're all so in touch with each other. So she said I can just call somebody, and she was telling me earlier that there are things that we can do to help keep other schools open, maybe not even just San Antonio, but us as Latin Americans that are in the valley.
One more thing. I have my kids, even my little one, 4-year-old, he's playing soccer. I have my 3 kids playing soccer. So I spent since August, well, my 11-year-old started when he was 5-year-old playing soccer. Now he's 11. We spend a lot of times, a lot of weekends with them, going out of town, doing tournaments on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So if I spend all that time out with them, so we can do some time, it's like everybody's going to work, everybody has something to do, but I spend some time taking them to practice, so I can spend an hour going to a meeting or going to do something for what is important.
All right, thank you.
I think this is a teamwork, and kids happy, schools and teachers, they love their teachers. And San Antonio, I can say we have the best teachers.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Good job with the English. Very good, yeah.
On my home, I just live down to Kearney Road. It's just too close for me. It's my community, it's my school, and if I ask my kids if they wanted to choose, if I can ask them to choose another school, or if I have to choose another school, they're gonna say to me, Mom, that is my school. I just love my school, because it's not even because it's close, it's because it's their school. It's just there and that school for all these years.
Thank you.
I don't move them from another school. It just,
I appreciate your comments. We appreciate your comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and I hope you guys all understand me.
We did. We understand you perfectly, yes. Okay. All right. All right, no more public comments at this time. I don't have any more sheets. So now we're going to move on to our introduction of our new head football coach. I believe Greg Bellis is going to introduce him.
It's my privilege and pleasure to introduce Coach Lance Wiggins. He is the new varsity head football coach for Nordoff High School. It's a return home for us because not only is he a graduate of Nordoff High School in the late 80s, an alum Ranger footballer, but he also coached for us for 9 years prior to a thankfully short stint coaching for Westlake. And so we're really lucky to have him come back to Nordoff. And not only has he been a coach at Nordoff, a student, a player, but he has been a father of many kids that have gone through Nordoff, ones that are still in Nordoff now and ones that are still to come. So woven into the fabric of the community like no other, having coached many players at Nordoff, even when he was an Eagles coach, and I do believe he was voted the Ojai Valley's most popular coach.
Second.
You didn't have to bring up that detail. Nonetheless, Lance, we're really happy to have you, and just the atmosphere, the vibe on campus, both in terms of parents that I've talked to, staff, students, has dramatically increased and improved from the moment that we appointed you. And I got a chance to go see a practice the other day, and from my very limited football knowledge, everything looked great. Thanks.
Good evening. Thank you. And I am more than excited to be back in the community again. You know, it was a very, very difficult decision to take this 1-year hiatus off. Although I learned a lot as a head coach. I became a little bit more guided going to a bigger school and learned some of the protocols like they were talking about earlier with the concussions. We learned a ton of that. Became USA Football certified as well as Heads Up certified. So I'm very aware of the different types of problems that could be created in the game of football. A couple of things that we've done this year to adopt to some of the new things is we've gone from a 90-minute to a 45-minute one-on-one contact. It used to be 180 minutes. per week. We've purchased 3 tackle donuts. If you've watched a UCLA practice, or you can Google tackle donut, it's just this giant round donut that you roll. UCLA uses it. The Ivy Leagues are using it. USC, Cal Poly, pretty much all the Pac-12 teams are using it. So if they're using it, if it's good for them, it's good for us as well. We have had a great and fantastic response from our community within the Optimist Club and Rotary, the Lions Club, and been very, very, very generous in giving to our program. So much so that we are purchasing new uniforms for the varsity team this year, both home and away. So I'm very thankful for that. A couple of other things that I wanted to talk about, and I'll just be brief about it, is I do have 6 kids. I'm blessed with them, and we have my oldest son is out of school. He played 4 years of high school, never caught a touchdown, never threw a touchdown, but he blocked for 47 of them, so that's important. And he's happy about that. And he lives down in San Diego. He's a materials engineer. He went to Cal Poly. My daughter goes to BC. I have my other daughter, Elena, who's running track. Made CIF this year, which she was very excited to do that. My son Tim, who's a sophomore, he's the worker bee of the family. Sports are not his gig, man, but the guy will work all day long. So if you're looking for a worker, he's out there. And then William, who will be a 9th grader next year, he is one of those kids that's very, very athletic, very energetic. And he's definitely looking forward to being a freshman next year at the high school. I'll have 3 of them there. And then we have one more coming up who's in 7th grade. He'll be in 8th grade next year. And so, after 6 kids going through the program, I think what's important to me is what I've learned from the school, as well as the teachers. Miss Taylor was one of my teachers. She was my daughter's teacher, and another daughter's teacher. So it's important to learn some of those characteristics. And what I do out on the field is I treat every one of those players as if they were my own. You have to nurture them. They're still children. They're still 16 and 15 and 14 and 17, and they think they know everything about everything, but they don't. And it's important for us to kind of guide them into a good, safe, and nurtured direction. We've had kids that have gone off the deep end and lost, and we've had kids that have gone off and come back, and so on and so forth. I've told them that we are going to be good citizens first, and that's it. It starts there. And if you're not that person, if you're not helping somebody with their bags, or saying good morning or thank you, or opening the door for them, I'm going to hear about it. I've been here since 1984. I know a lot of people, so I hear about it. I love hearing about, I was in a donut shop and you had 2 of your players and they bought a donut hole, or they did something for another kid. I love hearing about that. So I hope that they will continue to do that. We went to Noah's Ark. We expected about 5 or 6 players. We had 17. We stayed there from 9 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They had a great time. So I think the kids had a good time too, but the players actually had a really good time. So got to make cotton candy and all that. I'm sure they're eating some at the same time. The second thing is to be a student. It's important to give back to your school, and to be a student is important. Without education, you really don't have much to go on. I can tell you that. I tell this story to the kids, and then I'll let you go with the athletics. But when I was coming through high school at Camarillo High School, my freshman and sophomore year, I passed 2 classes. One was wood, the other one was agriculture. My sophomore year, I passed metal, and I passed another wood class. Amazing, right? It was really good with my hands. And when we did assessment tests, I was really good to be an Army grunt. That was my job. I was a worker bee. But it really took guys like Jack Smith and Dr. Barney at the time, and Mark Fritos, and I can name a couple of old guys that have been around that gave me a sense of purpose at Nordhoff High School. And I took 0 period through 7th period, and I took summer school, and I took 0 period through 7th period, and I graduated with a 3.85. I had like 7 extra credit points. I was really and I was beside myself. I worked at OI Ford for several years. I got my master's through Ford as a mechanic, and I work for a $1 million company doing research on transmissions now. So I get to blow things up at the same time. So what better thing to do than to go to work at 5:30 in the morning, help a bunch of people fix transmissions, and then come back to the place I love and coach football. So it really is kind of a full circle thing. I am excited to get going. Our coaching staff, by far, I think we've got the best in the county. I don't think there's another coaching staff that's better than us. We're almost 300 years of coaching expertise. We've been here, we've been through championships, we've got a couple of rings. Our plan of attack for this year is to re-instill the community back to the program, to really give back to you and make sure that we play with a Nordhoff pride that they can believe in, and also pass it down to the juniors and sophomores and freshmen coming up. And I think that so far so good, and as long as we keep giving them the high fives and the knuckles, I think that'll pass on to the next generation and so on and so forth. So that's me. I look forward to coaching, and I look forward to seeing you guys on Friday night and waving high and getting a big victory and singing our alma mater. So.
Any questions for Lance?
Can I pretend like it's an interview and we got to hire you?
No, I can take credit for that one.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I told Dr. Bayless. I said, he asked me if I had any other questions. I said, no, I just have a comment. He said, sure, what's that? I said, I can start tomorrow. And I did.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Okay to go? Yeah. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
gonna go back to practice.
Okay, all right. All right. So moving on to item 6.2.1. This is the acceptance of the final report of the 7-11 committee to the Ojai Unified School District. This is the committee's report that they did on April 13th, 2016. This is an action item. So
I'll move.
we need acceptance. Do we have a second? Any discussion? Okay, so.
Great report, thank you.
Great report, yes. Thank the 7-11 committee
Try
was
your work.
so conscientious. So all in favor?
Aye.
All right, none opposed. Now we're having item 6.2.2. This is a board decision concerning the elementary schools organization for 2016-17. And Hank is going to speak to this.
Very briefly, so you can see that we have some recurring issues here. Actually, 6.2.1 was fairly obvious. It already had happened in an informal way on April 14th, the day after the report was done, when the board met with the full 7-11 committee. But our attorney, being a crossing T and dotting I's guy, said make sure that you do it formally. That's what that agenda item is about. 6.2.2 is maybe also stating the obvious, but I am recommending to the board that the present organization of schools, elementary, obviously also secondary, remain in place for next year. We're not anywhere near far enough along in the discussion of whether that's the right answer or there are other better answers or a better answer for next year, so that to try to implement anything other than what we now have would be foolish, and we don't want to be foolish. So the recommendation is very straightforward. The only other thing I would say about that is, again, it's written specifically for, at a minimum, one more year. It might be longer than that when we get to the final decision in the upcoming months. The only thing I would say, though, is a sort of an addendum to continuing for next year, is that in general, and almost always as we plan for next year, I'll be thinking with the principals, Andy and others, certainly the faculty and classified staff, in a business as usual context, so that we're not going to be withholding doing anything that we've been doing and want to continue doing because the elementary school's decision is yet to be made in terms of the final one, except for one thing, and that is later in the meeting for any of you who might still be here when we get there. We're not going at this point to plan on any major Measure J projects for the elementary schools until the summer of 17. So once the board makes a decision about the organization of those schools, we can then get in and do some really heavy lifting, roofs and concrete and all kinds of things. We want to be sure we know, obviously, what schools will be in place for the upcoming years. However, we do have some very significant and important projects that we'll be doing in all the schools this summer that don't fall into that category of, $500,000 and up. In the case of roofs, we saw a major roof project that, had we done it in the summer of 16, and now we're going to look at it again in 17, was actually in excess of $1 million. So we're not doing those at the elementary schools, and for that matter, we're not doing those big projects in the secondary schools either, just because of the timing and other issues, but we're sure going to get at some important improvements this summer. So the recommendation is, as you see, to have the schools, all the elementary schools remain open for next year.
Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I think it's the right call right now. I don't think there's anything here that we want to rush.
No.
So,
We want to take our time,
Yeah.
really evaluate all the information we need.
I do think it's important, though, that this vote doesn't slow the process down. Oh, okay, now we can relax, we don't have to make that decision.
Right.
I think it's important that we still move forward so that we can make that decision as quickly as makes sense.
Yeah.
So I don't want to, let's wait till next spring, it's sort of that same discussion as the budget. You've got to start now, and you've
We have
got
to continue our discussions. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? All right, so all the elementary schools will remain open for 2016, 2017. Now, to item 6.2.3, a calendar for the final decision by the October 17th board meeting. This is another action item. And Hank is going to speak to this also.
Great segue, Jane. Okay, speaking of not letting any grass grow under your feet, I just want to remind everybody of what happened starting the day after the 7-11 committee finished its work. So the committee met here, did their final cosmetic changes on their report, agreed on it, as far as I know, unanimously, and then it was ready to go to the board, and the board met the next day with the whole committee. So that was April 14th. 5 days later, at the April 19th regular meeting of the board, there was an agenda item of some length where we all discussed issues relating to that April 14th meeting. So there were some things that percolated a bit on April 14th. We talked about it on April 19th. There were obviously other issues also. Then, May 3rd, we had a special meeting to address, in particular, 2 issues that related to the whole context of the elementary school's decision. Andy had brought to the board a very complete report, which if anybody wants a copy, I'd be happy to share with you, whereby the directors who manage the programs in this geography here, this district office area, talked about what it would be like to move that person's particular area to another place. That was one part. The second part, I presented some analyses that would show what we call the 5-4 school options, where each option closed one school, and we talked about what the configuration of numbers of students would be in each of those options, where the students would come from, albeit, as I said in the opening line, everything I'm about to tell you is incorrect. Okay, because you can't possibly know exactly what will happen. But I think there were some reasonably good projections about what we would look like with any one of 4 school configurations. So that happened on May 3rd. Here we are tonight, talking about the issue again. And this is where it gets sort of interesting. And I'm just using Tuesday nights now as a way to think about the upcoming months. We have a few Tuesday nights available between tonight and the June 28th regular meeting of the board, which is the last meeting in the school year. Linda is out of town on May 31st, so the dates that we could be looking at in terms of special meetings for this particular issue, or for that matter, the budget discussion and/or, would be next Tuesday night, not May 31st, so 24th, not the 31st. June 7th is a regular meeting where we have a lot of things going on, but certainly could include the issue again. Then 2 more Tuesday nights in June, the 14th and 21st, on to the last meeting of the year. So as we're talking about momentum, Andy and I are ready to do any kind of work, any kind of analysis that the board says, this is what we'd really like to learn about, and we'd like to do it on that date. Okay? Linda and I talked a little bit earlier today, maybe a logical date might be June 14th, because while we certainly can meet next Tuesday night, right, to do the budget, because it's all done in principle, right, for tonight. And we certainly could get some things together on this issue for next Tuesday night, but that might be a little bit rushed. So June 14th is a night where we could talk more about this issue all by itself, as is the 21st. And then the 28th ends our year. So then, if we're not done, if the board isn't done, hasn't made a decision for 2017 and thereafter, by June 28th, then we have the summer, where most people leave. And as I said to the board, I think it's really important that we not do a lot of public conversation between June 28th and the mid-August regular meeting. Because no matter how hard we try, we would never be able to get many of the people who are here tonight at that meeting, and it would look something other than transparent.
Yeah.
Okay? So when I suggested the October board meeting, I felt a couple of things were important. Number one, most important to me, that this was the board that would make that decision, as opposed to a subsequent board. Right? So the subsequent board will be seated in December of 2016 after the November election. This board actually will be seated for the November board meeting, but it's pretty late in the process. We know that Linda has indicated she's not running again, Payne is up for election, so you can figure it out. We will have one new board member, and potentially 2. So this is the board that should make the decision. It's just a fact.
No, I just,
Just a fact. I just keep going. I'm keeping going. I'm not his campaign manager.
I did not say a word.
No, but everybody was looking at you. Anyway, so that's.
Well, I think it's important to point out that I believe you think that because this was the board that listened to the 7.
I was about to say.
Yeah.
that was
Not
my-
because.
We
No,
chose
but
the committee.
They're both important. One, because I don't think another board, right, with 1 or 2 members should be the board that would make the decision. And as a matter of fact, this is the board that's gone through the whole process. So chose the 7-Eleven committee and has read, I don't know how many emails from me and to them, in addition to some social media commentary. So I think that this is the right time for the board to make that commitment, that by on or before the October board meeting, that the board would make a decision about the future organization of schools.
So is everybody available on June 14th that you know? No, you're not.
No, I have a board meeting.
Yeah, see that, I know that's about.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be Tuesday. I just picked
What
Tuesdays.
We could maybe talk to Kathy about
Yeah.
Yeah.
potential. I think that in that week, are you busy in that week or is
I think probably.
graduation week? Oh, that's graduation week, yeah.
But
But that's
later.
Thursday night.
That's
so
Thursday night,
Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday works. 15th works.
Okay.
15th is chaperone graduation.
In
Yep.
the afternoon.
That will be done.
Is that 4?
That'll be done, that's okay.
Yeah. So tentatively, we'll say a tentative
June 15th?
June 15th meeting, which will be only to analyze, again, to have more board discussion about the potential financial and educational impact of of reconfiguring the schools in our district. And
Chaparral graduation being at 5 o'clock. Do you want to move this
to 6?
It's 40 minutes. Yeah. I mean, you make it 6 if you want.
Let's make it at 6. We'll say the 15th meeting would be at 6, because that would give us time to go to shop for graduation. And, I mean, so board members direct questions to our OFT members, also to, everybody else, is there junior high graduation happening?
I just am wondering if you want the community and teachers to be here. It's the last day of school and a lot of, like, every single school has
It's not
something
going to be a
going on.
final meeting?
Right, but if you want community involvement, that's one of the busiest days of the year.
All the families will be celebrating.
Okay, well, we can discuss, thank you for bringing that to our attention. We can,
Did you say we have a
Monday.
June 7th meeting already?
We do, that's a regular meeting.
so
What about June 2nd? I mean, if she's gone
I
on
won't,
31st.
I won't be back
Back
on
on
the
the
6th.
June 13th.
We
And
can,
that following week, that was for the budget? Or,
Well, the budget, we were talking about that a little bit, but there are two ways to look at a special meeting on the budget. I mentioned May 24th, because next Tuesday, I'm just talking about Tuesday, because the construction of the budget is evolving between tonight and June 7th. Once June 7th comes, and Laura and I have had these conversations a bit over the years, it's not cast in stone, but it's getting there, right? And we try not to make many changes. In other words, if we really wanted to make some changes, it's very difficult to rejigger a state document once you put it in a state form on June 7th. That's why I'd like to get in on the earlier side, because, for example, the kinds of issues that Angie and Drew were talking about, and they know this because we just met yesterday, we're right in the middle of making decisions about the relationship between staffing and class size on the one hand, and dollars that might be available for other things, right? And that's happening as literally as this week. So I'd like to be able, if we're going to get together, to have you learn about those trade-offs on the earlier side, which would be next week. That's what I'm saying.
yeah, okay.
Okay, but it's most important most important for you to be there, right? So I want to be sure you can be there.
What about two meetings that week? Would be, the 24th for the budget and the 26th for 7-Eleven.
For what?
If you're talking about next week, a week from today, meeting on the budget,
Yeah.
you could have a second meeting that week
Oh, I
about
see what you're saying.
7-Eleven.
I see what
Did
you're saying.
did you hear the 13th floated, Monday, June 13th?
Is Monday better? Monday better for the?
For school
I know it's the last
events.
week of school, but Monday better than Wednesday?
Okay.
I would think it is.
The reason I'm suggesting June is because that gives us time to ask staff for information, and then we get it, in time for them to get it back to us. Because I'm worried that if we push, for next week for 7-Eleven committee meeting, we won't have whatever questions answered that we need to have answered, so.
So what about the 21st then, after graduation?
We can do that.
As I said, any of those Tuesdays.
Any of those.
Yeah.
You're right.
How's Monday the?
How's Monday the 13th?
I can do that.
Good?
All right, so that's when it's
Great.
going to be.
So that'll be a special meeting
Monday.
on the elementary schools at you,
Yeah,
on Monday the 13th.
yeah. So,
5:30. 5:30?
5:30. Okay, so, okay, so,
Is this an action item?
yes, this is an action item. So that's, we need to vote, we need to make a decision tonight, or we can postpone the decision, about approving, to make a final vote on the schools by October 18th. So I think.
the latest,
At the
yeah.
latest, right. So-
that's a final vote for the 2017-18 school year.
Right, right.
I'll move to approve that action.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so that will be our final point.
That's
where
our deadline.
That's our deadline. All right, so we have a lot
Unless
to
we move
discuss.
to vote to change it.
We can always do that. Anything can happen.
Is now the right time to ask for a bit of information?
Sure.
For that?
Yeah.
I would really like to know, the 7-Eleven committee had recommended closing some buildings, not schools,
Or classrooms?
classrooms, or however many classrooms or buildings or structures. If we could get some sort of a number on what the Measure J savings would be by not touching those, and also maintenance savings for not taking care of them beyond just the bare bones. I think that would be really helpful, and that's across all the schools.
And just to remind everybody, the recommendation was 4 specific classrooms at Miners Oaks, which actually is on the agenda later on, 24 to 27, and then 4 classrooms, so to be determined in Miramonte. That was really good. There might be a classroom here or there, but those were the 2 major segments.
Yeah. And I would just like to expand it, if there are other buildings or classrooms you think we don't necessarily need, let's talk about those 2, and if we could have some numbers for those 2, that'd be really helpful.
Sure.
Right, and then I would like to know from the teachers about, their feelings about combination classes, how they feel that impacts students' learning, and what teachers recommend as the best practice for OUSD in terms of our educational practices in the elementary schools.
Do you want that now?
No, not today, but before this June 13th meeting, and in writing would be nice.
I think also giving principals input would be huge.
Yes. Okay, perfect.
I would also, if we could, this is just kind of a general appeal because there's no one in particular we can ask. But we've had a lot of parents just say, we don't want our schools closed. I would just like parents in the community to think about, the trade-off in educational outcomes, the trade-off in the cost of keeping the schools open. Because we're going to be making the decision. I just want our eyes to be wide open about it. If we decide to keep all the schools open, we're going to be sacrificing something else. I just want to make sure everybody's eyes are open to say, we understand we're sacrificing this to do that. So if there are members of the community, parents who have opinions on that, would love to hear about it.
Maybe the PTOs or something could give us some opinions about that. That would be really good. Yeah. All right. Any other things we need that you can come off the top of your head at this moment?
I have some things marked at home, so I'll
Okay, just forward them to the
Sure,
proper person.
that'd be great.
All right.
Well, I assume that the previous discussion's in play already. Like we
Yes.
talked about, cafeteria space, we talked about, playground stuff, we talked about auditorium availability, all those things that will be impacted by larger groups of students at schools.
Right.
I know that Miners Oaks people brought up quite a bit the transportation aspect, the fact that a lot of those kids walk to school, what our plans would be with respect to transportation. And then there is that environmental impact. I don't know if that's quantifiable or if there's any information we can get on it, but somebody might want to weigh in on it.
Okay. All right, moving on to 6.2.4, issues relating to the potential leasing of the district office property. And this is Andy's area.
Sure, so we started on May 3rd. I provided a report of some logistical needs to consider as we looked at potential site move off of the 414 Ojai Avenue space. We provided to you the materials from our attorney on the steps that it takes in response to, okay, well, what's next if we do want to secure, lease or purchase options or bids. I'm not going to go through this entire document. I'll just state the first step we've already accomplished. That was to assemble that advisory committee. At this point, if we were wanting to move forward, we'd be offering the site to public agencies, to certain public agencies, other school entities. I'll say that the only entity that has a guaranteed right to the property, potentially, would be a charter school with 80 or more in-district, classroom-based ADA. So if a charter school were potentially interested, so they didn't meet those criteria again, 80 ADA, which means about 86 or so enrollment, it has to be a classroom-based program, and those 86 students have to actually be Ojai Unified School District students. They can't be coming from outside of the district boundaries to count toward that need. And then there's a very complex formula as to the way in which the calculation is determined for what their lease or purchase price would be. Other than that, the requirement for the district is to enter into good faith negotiations with an entity that makes such a request. But there is no requirement the district actually would make available a space or sell at any minimum or maximum threshold. The district has the ability to simply negotiate with them. After that, we would go through a bid process where we would make publicly known the interest to receive again, bids for lease or purchase, depending on what the board selected. And we go through the steps outlined here to actually receive those bids. And then we can potentially accept a bid that's less than the highest bid based on, again, the criteria that we would set up for that bid package. If we were going to prioritize some of the things, for instance, the 7-Eleven committee recommended, that may not necessarily yield the highest income for the property, but maybe going toward a certain community purpose that has, that this community and this board supports.
And did we ever get someone to tell us, renting per square foot, what the value of this property would be?
No, that's part of, that's actually part of the You could bring someone in to do an appraisal, but really this is the process where you learn what in fact the market might be interested in to lease or sell.
Andy, I noticed that the information you gave us also provided for a waiver option. I assume we don't think we would be exercising that.
At your discretion, but I would.
I mean, I don't know why. Reading it wasn't clear to me why a board would choose to go off from the bidding process and instead use this third option.
Andy, I'm sorry. This first offer to public agencies, is that even if the property is going to be for lease as opposed to for sale? Because it's offered to sell to public agencies, but if we were not going to...
I'll check with our attorney, but my understanding is that yes, it's for lease or sale.
Okay.
Making available a space that we've identified as surplus.
So if we're interested in leasing it, we'd have to offer them first right of refusal, essentially. They could have the opportunity to lease it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, again, are we talking about the unique situation I identified where we actually have a requirement to make available property at a set price, or the broader one, which is detailed here, which is simply to negotiate with them in good faith, but if we can't arrive at a mutually agreeable price, then there's no obligation to move forward with them.
No, that part I get. I'm just wondering, because the heading says offer to sell to public agencies, and so my question is, if we weren't looking to sell,
Right.
Would we have to do the same thing, make it available to them or offer it to them
My
for
understanding is
lease?
yes, but I'll confirm that with our attorney.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just, it feels like it's kind of hard to understand how this would work in the context of a lease. Because it's formulated in terms of bids. So, I guess you could imagine saying, bid us your highest monthly, rent, but then you'd have to consider, options and how much they would pay 10 years. And
Right.
I also noted that waiver option seems to be an option where the school district would choose more of an active involvement in what the property becomes. I was just noticing, like, the language says the school can send out requests for proposals and determine, quote, the most beneficial proposal under guidelines. So it seems there you're looking more in terms of what do we want this to be, not just sending it out to the world and saying who will give us the most money for it. And I bring this up because that particular option, that waiver option, says that you have to consult with your 7-Eleven committee. And I know we've always talked about the 7-Eleven committee, which is now 4 years old or whatever. Would we be consulting with them, bringing them back?
Some of them aren't here.
Like an action movie where they come out of retirement.
Expendables.
Brad.
Yeah.
That would do no box
That would
office.
be the 7 and 11.
Yeah. All right.
Well, it's a long way down the line, but there are a couple of friends.
Well, and actually, to that point too, because I noticed in that second paragraph, it says, the district's administration disposes of the property pursuant to the recommendation. But you don't actually have to follow that recommendation, right? You could choose otherwise, so. It's been a long time.
Thank you, Andy, for your thoroughness. We appreciate it very much. All right, item 7.1.1. This is, again, Andy's going to speak to this, elimination, reduction of classified positions.
So just like with our certificated staff that came before you first in March, and then again we discussed at our May 3rd meeting, Ed Code requires that if there's a possibility of a layoff due to lack of work or funds, that we need to bring it to the board. Classified staff are in a little bit different timeline. For all of these positions, they are school calendar positions, they're not 12-month positions, and so the requirement is that we notice the employee at least 60 days in advance of when their last day would be. So we're well within that timeline, given that, again, it would be, if there is an impact, it would be in August. We don't anticipate the majority of these positions will indeed actually face a layoff, but because of the uncertainty of the funds, we have to do this to maintain that flexibility.
Well, that was my big question, because boy, 4 of those positions are hourly positions at Summit.
Mhm.
And that would have a huge impact on that, and 3 of them are at San Antonio.
Right, and so those specifically, I believe, all those positions that you mentioned were from a funding source that we are making some changes to the way it's allocated across school sites. And so San Antonio and Summit both are seeing a slightly different allocation for next year. And so again, to maintain flexibility over the way in which those funds are expended, we need to make this decision tonight. But
I mean, I understand, you know, we're making it, and we don't really know, we won't know until August how many kids have enrolled and that sort of thing, but I do think if it's going to end up being this way, that it might affect some of our decisions for the 7-11, for, you know, for closing school too.
Yeah, and I would say, don't let them concern you.
Okay.
Because we'll make decisions about how many hours each school needs, particularly the small schools, you're right. Okay, when you drop an hour or 2 from San Antonio, or particularly Summit, it's a lot different than Toba.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have never let any school run in a way that was inappropriate, as best we could.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Now we have student teaching and fieldwork assignments. This is, or agreements. This is an action item. So this is our district collaboration with the university programs to provide training opportunities to credential programs. So do we have any discussion about this?
Yes, actually, I would like, just some information. I heard about a program called Breakthrough Collaborative, which is it's a group that they operate in all 50 states, but they take students who are learning, like from these schools, and they take high school students, and they train them for a week, hire them along with mentor teachers to run a summer school program of 4 weeks. And then they have a wrap-up of 1 week, so it's a 6-week paid, they're paid students, paid to mentor teachers. But it's, so I was just like, well, okay, so this is an interesting idea. Who would I talk to, you know, or how would you say, hey, Azusa Pacifica, have you ever heard of this, and would your students be interested? And the interesting thing about it is that the number of high school students who went through the program with a mentor teacher who ended up going and studying to be an educator is like 80% of the students who participated in it. Which I think of that program at Nordhoff right now, where on the Friday mornings where those students help that sort of.
Associate teacher?
Yeah, and if we can interest students in our high school into going into
Love it.
education.
We'll look at it. I'd never heard of it. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's,
that's
it's obviously different than here because you're talking about, you know, students who are already in colleges who want to move ahead. But you're talking about breeding.
Well, it's
to help them.
both.
Yeah.
They take college students and they
high
take,
school-
and high
okay.
school students, yeah.
Well, we'll look
Just
into
be
that. I've never heard of
interesting
it.
to find out, I mean, how,
Okay.
who pays for it, and how does that happen, and, you know.
And I just wonder, how is this list created?
It evolves. Jody Heath is our expert when it comes to helping people get certificated. And these are those universities that have historically worked with us, and we have excellent relationships, and she can pick up the phone. If we get an application from a really promising teacher, but there's a little bit of a lacking there somewhere in certification, we can engage with these, one or more of these universities. So that's really how they go. Some are obviously geographically proximate, and others are not at all. But they operate through online programs.
Do I have a motion to approve this?
Move to approve.
Okay. I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Okay, now we're moving on to really fun stuff, the budget, preliminary budget. Andy. Okay, Andy and Laura. All righty.
Sure, so I'll just give a little bit of background on where we are from a state level and the new information that came out this past week, how we believe it's going to be impacting the district, and then we'll actually go into what we have before you tonight for the preliminary view at the adopted budget. We've talked about this a number of times. The budget process coming up from the state begins in January, where the governor releases his January budget proposal for the upcoming fiscal year. For 4 months, what we do is look up to the state to see where the revenue projections and actuals are matching up. And what we saw all along the way the past few months was that revenue started off the year doing pretty well and then started to go down. And in April, obviously when we pay our taxes, it had a significant decline. In fact, that decline below projections in April offset all of the initial positive that we saw in the first few months. So what that means, when the governor came out with his revision to his budget just this past Friday, was that we see a ceasing of a trend that we've seen in the past few years. The past few years, we saw a nice increase in revenue coming to us in May because the governor historically provides a conservative estimate for revenue in January. What happened this year, we again believe his intention was to provide a conservative estimate, and just what reality dictated was that that estimate ended up being proven pretty accurate. So what we are looking at is, whereas last year we saw a really significant increase in one-time dollars to all school districts, it came to about $530 per ADA, a really significant sum for us. This year in January, the governor proposed about $214 per ADA, and what he came out with on Friday was increasing it to $237. So that worked out to be about $50,000, $55,000 increase to the district in one-time funding compared to where we were in January. So still positive for the district, but certainly a very different trend than the $1.2 million increase that we saw last year. In general, LCFF remained about the same from, what's that?
I'm gonna turn the AC back on, it's getting warm.
In general, LCFF revenue is looking about the same as it was in January. We don't have the full update and exactly the impact from the release on Friday. Went up a very small uptick, but we believe it's going to mean just about the same revenue that you currently see in the preliminary budget. The preliminary budget number, though, was based on the numbers as of the January proposal. We weren't able to provide the updated revenue, again, because it hasn't been released the actual calculator used to determine that.
Okay.
So that's how the state picture looks. And now if we go into the preliminary budget for our district, I just want to emphasize that this is our first look that we're providing to the public and to the board on the budget. Very much welcome the possibility of a special meeting next week where we can actually drill down on some of these line items and we can identify. There we go. We can identify priorities among the what's currently budgeted. I'll give a lot more detail in the June 7th release for the adopted budget on what exactly the new things that we've implemented this year relative to what's happened in the past. I can say that one priority that I've shared with you on a number of occasions, I know that you echo the sentiment and the priority I'm making it, is ensuring that when we see a particular value for a line item that we actually have a clear understanding of what's making up that larger sum. A $200,000 number that you see on this page is actually going to be made up of, let's say, 20 different planned expenditures. And so if we make some changes through the year, then we'll actually have a better explanation of, well, we were planning in June to purchase this, but in November we made a change and chose to go a different path. So we can definitely talk about that again, though, at a special board meeting, or if we don't end up holding that, I'm welcome anyone individually to come and we can look through the way the budget's shaping up. We still have, of course, a few line items in there that, something like a repair that we're looking at historical trends, but that we aren't going to be able to, know which pipe is going to burst at which school site on which day. We know that we will have a number that will have burst, just as we did last night here at our district office. So we have certain items that are just, based on historical trends, knowing, again, an uncertainty, but knowing that the value is still going to be there throughout the year, the cost is going to be there throughout the year. So that's the process that we're going for building this budget. And We're continuing to work. Laura Daly is still working on making sure that we really get there by June. So this is just, again, that first glimpse. I won't go through too much of the individual line items, but I do want to say that just as we were projecting back in March when we looked at the second interim revision, if you go to page 3 on this, you can see that bottom line, what we focus on most often, is that unappropriated amount. That's the very bottom line on page 7 of 7 in your packet, the actual page 3 of 3 of the budget numbers. If you look at the middle section of numbers, that's the prelim 1. The first set of numbers is revision 2, so that's comparing our second interim budget 15-16 to this preliminary budget. So again, this time I'm on page 7 of 7. The middle section of numbers, if you go to the very bottom, unappropriated amount, you'll see is increasing up to $926,000 in the preliminary view of next year's budget, up from what we're currently planning on ending this year with of $770,000. So we're looking at about $170,000, $130,000 or $160,000 increase surplus of revenue over expenditures in the 16-17 fiscal year based on this budget this time. Just to highlight a few things.
I'm sorry, I understood this when I read it, and I've had a long day, so remind me again what I'm looking at. The revision 2 is today?
Revision 2 is the current, most recent budget for the 15-16 school year, so our current school year. So the revision 2 is what was brought to you in March for second
I couldn't put my brain
interim.
around it.
And then preliminary 1 is, again, this is the first view, and we don't even call it adopted. In June, you'll see it referred to as the proposed adopted. Right now, this is just a preliminary view. So, and the number that we most frequently focus on is the unappropriated amount. That's the ending fund balance that doesn't have certain restrictions around it. Like our projected ending fund balance is going to be about 1.7 million. However, we don't have 1.7 million available to us because we must retain a 3% reserve of 767,000. So the money that has flexibility would be that unappropriated amount.
And the number right next to it is the reserve, the 3%? The restricted is another word for reserve?
Economic uncertainties.
No, so if you actually make your way up the page
Yeah.
to the 767, that's the reserve.
Got it.
So what we focus on most often is the unrestricted column, because that, again, has as the name implies, has the least restriction around it. And so greatest flexibility over creating new expenditures or potentially pulling back on current planned ones. The restricted ending balance or unappropriated amount is things like the VC Innovates grant that may have some revenue remaining that we don't fully expend, but we can't use that on a separate purchase, or the teacher innovator grant that was for specific staff development for primarily certificated staff. We don't have, again, flexibility to move remaining funds into another area. So that's why I don't highlight as frequently the restricted column as I do the unrestricted. So real quickly, I want to highlight just a couple things. I'm not going to go off of the page in particular, but I just want to talk to you about what we do have in the expenditures planned at this time. We have a 1% salary enhancement for all staff.
That's page 3, page 3 or 7.
That would be the page 6 of 7.
The text is on here.
Correct.
You just go right to the budget. Okay.
But I'm not actually going to be calling your attention to the individual line item. I just want to make sure you're aware of things that we currently have built into this budget. And these are all subject to negotiation still, but we've certainly heard throughout the year your priority and making sure that we do maintain our teachers and all of our staff a priority in this budget. And so even though a year ago when we had our last salary settlement, we had 0% projected in the out years for salary enhancements. We wanted to take the lead that we've been hearing, making sure that we do maintain some placeholder in that budget. So this includes a 1% salary enhancement for all staff, which really what we do is return the 1% that was off schedule for this year, that will be coming off of staff salaries in July. We've also, again, this is a placeholder subject to negotiations, but we've inserted a $40,000 line item for elementary teacher stipends. Currently, there are far more opportunities at the secondary level for teachers to take on supplementary or support roles, management support type roles, to be able to receive stipends. And we're not talking about just coaching stipends, but actually related to the curriculum or related to the actual regular school day. And so what we're trying to do is to create some equity between secondary and primary teachers. So again, a line item subject to negotiation, but we wanted to include something in there at this time.
And where is that one on 5-7? That's
So it would be on the expenditure side, 6 of 7, but we don't actually itemize out among teacher salaries. That it would be up in the very top column, teacher salaries. It would be something, it would be a portion of that $6.6 million number.
Normally on these, we're looking at 3-year projections when we put those increases in. What does this do to our year 2 and 3 projections?
So right now, we would be projecting a deficit in both the 2 out years, roughly $1 million deficit in 17-18 and 18-19. I'm sorry, yeah, 17-18 and 18-19.
So that was actually one of my questions, because you mentioned that, and I didn't see that even on this,
On the years again, say that again?
We'd be looking at deficit spending in 17-18 and 18-19,
Right,
both of the 2 out years.
Yeah, 17-18 is the little one, and 18-19 is the.
So keep in mind that that's a better term for that would be debt as opposed to deficit. Deficit is an individual year looking at the extent to which certain expenditures exceed revenues. And in order for us to get down to that little number, we're starting the year with $994,000 if you're looking at that multi-year. So just for those in the audience that you may not see, we're looking at the multi-year projection. In 17-18, it's saying that we'd be starting the year with a $994,000 beginning balance in that unappropriated amount. And it'd be projecting ending that with a $75,000 negative. So in order to move from a $990,000 bank account, what's that?
It's meant by a million.
Correct.
We don't end up with $1 million in deficit.
Well, $1 million deficit, again, I think deficit versus debt, the distinction. So deficit is, again, referring to simply looking at the single year picture of the extent to which expenditures are exceeding revenues. However, for the, what we could call debt, or for the ending fund balance, we would be looking at $75,000 in 17-18 and 18-19, because we don't have the luxury of starting with a beginning balance as robust as we did in 17-18. We'd be looking at a far larger negative number in the 18-19 year.
Right, so I guess I just want to clarify this, because I'm all for increasing teacher salaries, 100%, but we can't spend more money than we have.
So what we're talking about here is that if theoretically the 2016-17 budget happened to be exactly what's on these pages.
If we were to adopt this budget.
If you adopted this with a 1% increase.
Right.
And then had a 0 increase in the next 2 years.
Right.
Then the result would be exactly what Andy was talking about, a very, very small amount we would have to cut, if you will, from the 17-18 budget so that we don't spend more than we have.
Right.
And then a very large amount in planning for 18-19, because that's where the $1.75 million revenues less than expenditures would happen.
Right.
So it is 3 years out. Things always change. They always have.
They don't always change for the better.
They have generally, but I think one of the things that Andy was talking about earlier in his introduction is that, and you need to explain this, I think it's really important, 2 things. One, things are happening in Sacramento where a conservative governor, albeit a very pro-education governor, a conservative, is implementing that conservatism. Okay? So that where he has choices to make, and he has a lot of choices, he's doing that. Even having said that, the education community has been far, far better funded than most public sector agencies, by far. Because there's a formula that kicks in. So we're fortunate in that respect. So that's part of the story. But the other part of the story is the whole recent history and soon to be the end of the LCFF calendar. I think you really need to explain that, because that plus our hopefully not continuing declining enrollment after next year. at that confluence, right, of LCFF, high enrollment, conservatism in Sacramento. But just explain again where we are in our history in relation to the end of the LCFF increase.
So, I think your point very well taken. We do need to address what currently would be a planned structural deficit in those 2 out years. We are looking at, Governor Brown created the LCFF local control funding formula in 2012 with the intention of significantly increasing funding to education. The plan was that it was going to be an 8-year phase-in to get to what he believed the targets was, which was the target was based off the overall funding level, adjusting for enrollment or ADA across the entire state. Again, not to an individual district, but across the state, trying to bring the same level of funding to education as we had back prior to the recession. No one ever said that was actually a sufficient amount. We just had gone so far down from there that we could say, well, let's make that our target and we can build from there. The plan was that it was going to take 8 years to phase in. We're looking at entering year 4, and we're actually going to be at 96% of the phase in 16-17. So if you think about 4 more years still planned of this phase in, we only have 4% to go. In 16-17, actually the governor just declared and it's based on a complex formula, he didn't have discretion over it, but declared a 0% COLA. First time in my knowledge, it's certainly recent history that the state has declared a 0% COLA. They've been small lately, but they haven't been zero. But really what we're looking at for the next few years is going to be no more than the equivalent of COLAs. Again, if you're going 4% over 4 years, that's roughly 1 to 2% is what we're anticipating of a funding increase for LCFF. So we really are near full implementation and very little new monies coming in from LCFF and not nearly sufficient revenues to offset the declining enrollment that we continue to be facing.
Talk a little bit about Prop 30.
Prop 30 was passed in 2012. It had 2 components. A significant amount of the revenue was going toward education. First component was a sales tax increase, a 1/4-cent sales tax increase for the entire state. That is due to sunset end of this year. The second piece of it was adding 2 new income brackets for the highest income earners in the state. And that's not due to sunset until 2018-19. However, the significant push is being made right now to have a Prop 30 extension on the ballot for November. It's not going to be taking care of the piece for the sales tax increase. The supporters behind the proposition have accepted that one is sunsetting into this year. However, their real focus is on ensuring that we maintain that higher income tax bracket for state income taxes, and that would be going out to 2030 calendar year. And so we're right now hopeful that will pass with a lot of support across the state from a number of different constituency stakeholders. However, Governor Brown hasn't supported the proposition, and right now, if Governor Brown isn't supporting it, then it does make it a much harder battle. But if it is passed, then we're not looking at if it's passed, if it doesn't pass, we're not looking at a cut from current revenues or current money coming from the state, but would again slow down the extent to which the increase to funding education continues in the 18-19 years and beyond. So we're hopeful that Prop 30 will pass. If it does, though, there will be no actual impact on the fiscal outlook in 16-17 because, again, its only impact is actually on the income tax portion, which wasn't due to sunset in 16-17 anyway.
So, Andy, I see the roughly 1.8 something jump in STRS for next year,
right.
The 2% jump for PERS. And my recollection, and I don't have it all in my head, but at some point, our contribution for STRS kicks up into a really significant increase.
That's correct. So
what year is that?
We've certainly heard that teachers are looking at a 1% increase in their contribution for this upcoming year, just as they faced this past year. The district too is looking at an increase. Last year it was 1.85%. This coming year it's 1.85%, and it's going to be increasing up to nearly 20%.
Right.
And that happens right now in planned 1.85% increments up to that amount. And Laura, is it 2020 is when the full phase-in occurs? Similar, CalPERS is going to be at that same rate. Both rates were around 10% as recent as this year, 10 to 11%, and they're both nearly doubling over the next 5 years. So CalPERS has a 2% increase this year, a 1.2% or so increase planned, and it's in your paperwork, but 1.2% planned for next year, and then they're planning 1.2% increases for those out years.
All right, and STIRS is going to do 1.85 until we
Right.
get to 19 something.
Exactly. Right, so both of them are looking at around a 2020, 2021 implementation. So that certainly is impacting our budget. In fact, if you look at, I just received some information today that I haven't been able to do it for our district yet, but they were taking a sample district, a statewide organization that helps with projecting funding formulas for districts. And in fact, actually, a few members of OT and I are going to be going to their budget workshop at the end of this week with Laura as well to hear their guidance coming down from the state. But what they showed was that the increase to STIRS and PERS, the increase that happens with special education, both when you're paying the county for certain services like we do, as well as just the need to maintain the current level of services that you typically see about 3% increase in special ed each year. And then also with the minor but minimum wage increase into this year, and then with just step and column, that far exceeds for most districts the new revenue coming to them this year.
Wow.
So a district that like us who does not have a robust beginning fund balance is looking at all new revenue going simply toward those increases before we can look at new expenditures.
Let me ask about that, because there was something, people have been talking to me on and off about Deanza and all the data, or they're calling themselves, the changes that they made. And I was wondering, when I was looking at on your first page, 2 of 7 here, local control funding formula, my understanding was a lot of their funding came from the fact that their demographics were not, in school, were not matching the neighborhood or the county. Right, so if you say, their neighborhood had 60% low-income second language learners, but the school had 95%. So they got all this funding to sort of try to draw the demographics back to the school that matched the neighborhood, right?
So the the primary funding source for all education is LCFF. You're absolutely correct, that's the way in which LCFF increases your allotment is based on your identification of low income as measured by the free and reduced price meal applications, English learners, and then homeless and foster youth. However, they don't actually look at it from a standpoint of comparing the demographics of your school to the broader community. So they wouldn't have received additional funding because the demographics didn't match up with the community. They would have received it regardless of the demographics of the community. They'd receive it based on the actual enrollment at their school.
Okay. So something like Miners Oaks, that's not something that you can look at and say, the demographics of Miners Oaks doesn't fit the demographic of.
No, there would be no increase in funding, because really where Governor Brown's focus was with the local controlled funding formula was realizing that we have a very real achievement gap in the state, and the achievement gap is largely along racial and socioeconomic lines. And so, he said if we're going to do something real about trying to close this achievement gap, we have to be honest about the reality that students who are English learners and who are low income have more often greater needs to be able to provide services to educate them at the same quality or level as other students. And so the funding formula is trying to provide funding to help close the achievement gap for those students. It's not necessarily, it's just a byproduct, but not the purpose to also try to change the demographics of the school to make it more appealing or a magnet or something like that.
Any other questions for Andy?
I do have a few, but I need a second.
Okay. I want to say I'm so excited to see that we're not paying the trans.
Yeah.
That's really great.
First year that we do have
Yeah,
sufficient.
what a waste of money. Every time we have to do that, I just get really upset, but we're not doing it.
Sure. First, apology to everyone. I had to run out because I got a text that my dog had been found out on the road. He's okay.
Okay, there you go. Oh, okay.
How did I manage to phrase it like that? My dog was running around. So. Andy, So this 1% that the teachers have to contribute to STIRS, their retirement program, is there something similar going on with PERS? You mentioned that PERS expenses to the district is also going up, but do the participants also have this increased burden?
No, not in this year. And just to complete the conversation, the 1% that we've talked about for teachers is only partially accurate. For the teachers, which for us it's almost completely because we have so many teachers with longevity, but any teacher who started prior to 2013, January 1, 2013 is facing that 1%. If they started after 2013, so our newer teachers are looking at only about a 0.6% increase. So it's a 0.5% compared to the percent that the majority of our teachers do face. But classified staff are not seeing that same increase.
And what percentage of a teacher's paycheck goes towards STIRS typically? I mean, this is an increase, right?
Right.
So already there's a big chunk going to STIRS.
Right. It's about 10%. What's the exact number you guys know?
I think it's actually more like 8%. Somewhere.
But now it would be 9.
But we don't pay into Social Security.
Right, so
we pay into STIRS,
which classified staff pay into both the Social Security as well as PERS. So they're paying, if you're a post January 1, 13 employee, then you're paying about 13.2% between the two. And then, I'm sorry, 12.2% between the two. And if you are a pre-January 1 to 13 employee, you're paying another percentage on top of that.
And what does a normal person pay in Social Security tax approximately?
6.2. Right, right, so.
An average Joe.
A civilian.
I do have another question. The health insurance premium increases are incredibly low.
Right, right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
And this is actually
dealing
the
with
second
double
year having
digits at
incredibly
work
low
right now.
increases, so
Is there something you've done specifically to keep them there,
I will
or?
take full credit. Laura, do you know any more of why CISC has been coming up lower than historical?
I don't. I'm really happy.
Yeah.
Stay healthy.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad we made the move to CISC when we did. There's a lot of districts that are still, in other JPAs that are just getting hit, slammed. I don't know. Is it Obamacare? Is it? I don't know.
I don't know, because this is not what we're seeing.
Yeah, SIBO certainly, our former administrator for our medical plans was SIBO, who is our current administrator for dental and vision, although we're moving away from them effective October 1. They have been, and I sit on the board for them, and so we've seen that their HMO, I think, has about 16% increase this year planned, and their PPOs are still upper single digits, I believe, and so there is, CISC is certainly, bucking the trend of what other local
It's the largest largest JPA JPA in the
Right.
state. For
And can you explain to me why, I mean, do we offer employees a choice between a PPO and an HMO?
We do.
Which is a nice benefit.
And is that all through CISC?
Yeah.
And CISC consists of just school districts throughout the state of California?
You're trying to cheat.
And, I mean, when we look at the budget, I mean, I know the private schools aren't doing that. They've switched from PPOs to HMOs because it's cheaper. So the fact that we're still offering an option is.
What is I don't believe actually there's that great of a difference between our HMO and PPO.
No, they used to be a
There used to be a big
big
gap.
jump, and now but the HMO has gotten higher to where it's almost the same
Yeah,
cost as the
it's
PPO.
actually, going off my memory, it's no more than a $15 stand
Yeah, it's
of a
very,
$15,000 line
very
item. It's within 10% of each other.
Kaiser is still lower. We
So
actually have 3 options, HMO, PPO, and Kaiser.
With Anthem HMO, PPO, or Kaiser HMO.
So some very good decisions were made in the district to go with this pool.
This is a different JPA than our liability insurance, right?
Correct.
At one point, we were doing it in the same pool, right? No?
So liability insurance has always been separate from medical, dental, vision, although it's really blurry because it's actually the same executive director who oversees both bodies. But we continue to have our all of our risk management and our liability insurance and those coverages work comp through Ventura County school's self-funding authority, BC, SS.
Yeah, at this point, I'm wondering, do we want to have a special budget meeting next week? I'm just asking the board here, because Andy, you had indicated that you thought that was a good idea.
At what point, like I said, I'm more than happy to have individual meetings with anyone who's interested and welcome anyone else's participation, so it's not necessary that we have a board meeting, but that was brought up earlier, and that's it.
What do you all think? I mean,
I'm up for it.
do you think it would be beneficial? Is what I guess is my question.
I mean, my personal feeling is we've covered the items pretty well, but I would be willing.
I'd be more than willing to, but I am feeling like I have one or two more questions, and then I don't know. Again, I still like that idea of, and I don't think a board meeting, but a workshop, and you were talking about in terms of a future, not for June 7th budget, but in terms of, look, now that we see this budget and where it's falling and where the next 2 years are falling, what are we?
How can we manage
Yeah,
this?
what are ideas out there that might change the focus? I mean, whether it falls into, keeping the schools the same way they are, whether it falls into, I don't know. I think an exchange of ideas.
I'm wondering if early in the fall, when we can talk early in the year about the budget, makes more sense than, because we're just tweaking around the corners right now.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think you're sort of coalescing around a really important point. We had a great meeting, 4 hours I shared with the board last night. We had a great meeting with Angie and Merv and their representative from the state, just talking about trade-offs. And the fact is that, as Merv said very eloquently, after 5 or 6 years of cutting and cutting and cutting, there just isn't a whole lot left in terms of discretionary spending. So, but where there is discretion, this particular year, because, and we've talked about this a lot at this table, because the enrollment decline next year is almost entirely at the elementary schools. There are 3 full-time positions. Remember on May 3rd when we had a special meeting, we talked about that, right? Where those rescission letters that could have gone out then were actually, by the end of last week, May 15th plus, I didn't send them, so that those original letters of March are still intact. That's about the amount of discretion that we have right now. I mean, unless, well, not unless anything. The secondary schools, actually, Tilha looks like it'll be a little higher next year than this year. And Nordhoff looks like it'll be at the same, or maybe a little higher, maybe a little. And there's no evidence at all that there's overstaffing in either place. So,
Just the opposite.
going back to the point of
Yeah.
cut. I mean, you start in 2010-11. Linda and I remember that year too well. So we have 80 to 90 or so students less at the elementary schools. So I can show you, and I will show you, I think I told you I was meeting with the elementary principals on Thursday. I will show you, and I'll show Angie, or particularly Angie, because she lives that life, exactly what the 2 scenarios would look like. Or actually, there are sort of 3 scenarios. This school, they're just the largest schools. These 3 schools with and without that teacher. Okay? And you can see exactly what the projected class sizes are with and without the teacher.
And why just the large schools?
Because the number of students, because some can't go to 1. Okay? And San Antonio has 6 and has the corpus of students already there, right, who would move forward next year to justify those same teachers. And they have no enrollment decline. TOPA right now is looking at 30 to 40 less because of a large 6th grade and a smaller projected kindergarten. Same thing with Miners Oaks and Miramani, but less of a decrease, more in the 20 to 30 range. So, bless you. So that's why it's there. Okay? But it doesn't absolutely have to be there. And when you see the class sizes, going back to combination classes, and you see the impact on combination classes that would be constructed, particularly in 2 of those 3 schools without that teacher, you'll see where the real challenge is. even though the enrollment drops, and we all know this, enrollments don't drop precisely where you want them to drop.
Yeah.
Okay? Particularly.
Not evenly, for
Particularly
sure.
in the high school, where you say, oh, well, we lost 50 kids. Well, yeah, that's over 4 classes and, 25 classes, 4 grades, and 25 classes per grade, so you have a half of a kid less. So, it's a decision that I would really want to make in terms of reemploying or not reemploying 1, 2, or 3 of the teachers. I really want to make it by June 7th, or at the absolute latest, June 28th. But if it turns out that we just can't, for budget reasons or other reasons, then it would have to go through the summer. I've communicated, I told you I would do this. Communicate with each of them. We've had some verbal conversation, we've had some email conversation. The great news is they all want to stay, okay? And they know that, each one knows that, my only mandate is do not accept a position. If you want to look, I understand that, for sure, I would too. Don't accept anything until you contact me to let me know that you actually have a job offer, because we want to have them back if we can afford it, okay? So that's honestly, other than if Andy's, I'm positive he's not withholding any dollars from me. So, there just aren't dollars elsewhere to cut, particularly in May. And those are it's the only sort of corpus of dollars. It's about $200,000 for 3 young teachers plus benefits. That's about it. Okay. So.
We have a few teachers leaving, right?
We had 2 retirements. 2 retirements. We have 3 retirements. We have 3 retirements. But that doesn't create any significant difference. I mean, it's because all those people are, 2 of them, right, are still retaining health benefits through their retirement. So while there might be a, $25,000 difference, I'll just pick that, depends on whom you hire, it's probably not that much. $20,000 difference between the salary of the exiting person and the salary of the incoming person, 15,000 of that goes to retiree health benefits. So, we've tried to, Angie and I have talked about some programs, reinstating maybe for 17, 18, the early retirement program that we had for this year, which actually yielded 7 people. And God bless them, I hope they've loved the year, and when I see them, they all have smiles on their faces. But that was because there hadn't been an early retirement program for a long time. So the idea is to try to sort of space it out a little bit, right, so people can anticipate it. I wish I could tell you that I know of pockets of dollars in this $25 million that falls under that general discretionary definition. I just don't see it.
And just to give you a rough frame of reference, you'll see every district in the state spending somewhere in the 80th percentile, in the 80s, on total staff compensation. In Ventura County, the mean is around 84 to 85% of your budget is staffing costs, again, either salaries or the benefits to support the salaries. Our district, we're about 86%. So we are actually, as far as overall portion of the budget going toward staffing costs, we are above the mean in the district. That's in no way contradictory to the commentary of how low.
I know what. And, okay, because, then there's semicolon because of what you were talking about before, and we've done our own study, right? We have, I'm positive, even without ever looking at the other distributions of people on the salary schedule across the county, there's not a doubt in my mind that we are well above average in terms of the percentage of our staff in the far right-hand column and the far lowest area of the highest years of service, okay? So, the average salary that would drive that a little bit higher percentage, a couple percent higher than we have, that's why it's there. It certainly is not because of the salary.
Right, by all means, that's what I'm saying, it doesn't enable.
How we do on that, okay?
I have some asterisks or caveats.
Yeah, well, let's finish.
I would say that in addition to very true and accurate statement Hank just made. It's also in part because of the special education cost, and that we do have a higher than standard across the county classified cost, and that's predominantly our instructional assistants serving in special education, the number of instructional aides that we have. And then another piece of that is certainly our benefits, that we are one of the few districts that still provide full employer contribution as well as the post-retirement benefits. When you add in all those pieces together, that's what makes up the slight percent or two over the county.
I think we also agreed, as long as I'm telling the story here, we also agreed among OFT leadership and Andy and me that when you take, however you might measure how well or not well a district is doing on its salary schedule compared with other districts, we agreed across the board when we picked 4 or 5 or 3 spots on the salary schedule that we are either 19th out of 20 or 20 out of 20. That's what I think. Okay. When you add in the benefits, we creep to 17. Okay, so we're still in the bottom quartile without the benefit description that you just gave. So, you know, there are a lot of different ways of looking at things, but the fact is that the bottom line, if you will, here we are in 2016, starting in 2008 or 9 when those cuts started. I can speak to 2009 into 10, that after we cut almost 10% of our staff in 2010-11, once we did that and cut other things, my goal has been to retain as high a percentage of the present staff every year as possible. And in the last 4 years, we've done it. Okay, and we've cut everything we know how to cut that doesn't relate to people, and still be responsible. You know, in terms of facilities, like first pipes and things like that. So anyway, back to the issue of the special meeting. We want to answer any question tonight through and including June 7th. And you know, I'm always happy to come to a meeting and conversation. But I also want to be sure that if we did meet, say next Tuesday, that we have a real agenda.
Yeah, something that's...
Well, okay, I'd like to speak to this whole subject because I have to say, from the time I was interested in being on the school board and now having been on the school board for coming up on 2 years, this conversation we just had is frankly one of the most illuminating, you know, and of the type of conversations that I consider the most illuminating. I mean, these, you know, when you say we're at 84 or we're at 86% of our total budget that we allocate towards personnel, while at the same time we have personnel who are not happy remotely with how much they get in terms of salary and benefits. You know, we gotta really, to me, open up every possible avenue. I see advocates here for Miners Oaks who talked about do everything you can do to find financial means to avoid closing a school because of so many different reasons, they say, including, and we all know, the uncertainty of what happens to those ADA dollars that you get through the kids that may not any longer be in your school system. But from my perspective, whether it's now or in a single meeting, which doesn't seem like the right fit, it seems like this is an ongoing conversation. I, as a board member, still don't really understand what trade-offs there are in terms of discretion. I'm not aware of any.
Well, in fact, Kevin, just to sort of amplify that, and Andy or Laura might know this pretty close off the top of his or her head. If you take the 86% of it, now you have all the people paid for. I agree with the special education caveat. Most of the other 14% is not discretionary. Right? I mean, you fill in the blank, insurance, legal fees.
3 to 4% is utilities with.
Right. So, I mean, we could. So really, it's even more of that.
But so what I say as a board member is that I nevertheless am being asked to untie my hands and say, well, at least we have to collectively try and do something, or if we don't do anything, we have to have a darn good reason to do nothing. And so I do think that these more detailed conversations about categories of expenses and creative thinking, and not in any way to disparage anyone's creative thinking already, but just either we just have conversations where we look at each other and say we'll do our best, knowing full well that there's virtually nothing we can do, or we try and do something different. And in order to come to those decisions, analyze what the options are. Because as I sit here, I know we have this big elephant in the room, which is closing an elementary school, which I know some people don't even see as particularly relevant from a financial perspective. It's more of an educational issue. So then, if that's not a financial opportunity, what is? And then I look back at the teacher friends of mine and say, what do we do?
Well, the answer isn't, but I'm going to test this out on you. How many of you have, in any of your conversations with parents of present students or just in the community with people who know what goes on here, how many of you have been told your class sizes are too low?
Too low?
No one.
Okay, anybody? Okay, well, that was my theory, okay. How many board members have been told your class sizes are too low? Answer, 0.
Thank you.
0, right, okay. And then I would say, I'm just looking at Chuck because he's smiling. How many of you have been told that your classified staff is too high? You have too many people, right? And you know where I'm going on that, okay? All right, so that is exactly the confluence of dollars. Other than benefits, where we're pleased that we have the stronger position, at least there, weight compared to salaries. That is the confluence. The number of people relative to the students and the services you provide, and the payment to each person, and therefore the totality of payment for those people. That's it. Mike, you live that life.
Yeah. Yes, I'm going through this right now. Although, I do want to ask another question, and it may be just whistling in the dark, whatever. But I lost the metaphor, yeah. It's like,
I know we know.
It went. But
it's after 8 o'clock.
It's 8 o'clock. We're talking about expenses, but there's the other side of the equation, right, which is revenue. And I'm looking at VC Innovates, you're saying that grant money is going down. Is that because of the life cycle of the grant, or is that because of lessened participation? And then my corresponding question is there an opportunity for greater participation?
In that program?
In that program or other revenue-producing programs?
Perhaps. I would have to say I've been shocked positively. And a lot of this has to do with the relationship, and this is, we're not getting favoritism, but I think the relationship that has unfolded between Kim Hoy and Tiffany Morse
Tiffany's
has
sharp.
been, Tiffany being the county vocational education person, career education person, and Kim, who took that on as the high school representative. There's not a doubt in my mind, whether it's the article that was in today's paper,
which was really good, by the way.
Environmental science program, or several other smaller things, or Kim's own program next year, right, to teach choreography on a countywide basis, and the county is paying for that section, okay? That we disproportionately, positively, we appreciate it, have benefited from the initiatives of the county, no doubt. And in fact, beyond that, the county, I've said this at this table tens of times, if it were not for BCOE and support from Ventura Unified School District, probably 80% of the staff development initiatives that we've had in the last, I'll just speak for 7 years, wouldn't have happened, or they would have happened at a much lower rate. I'm looking at Catherine in the back. She's been, spearheading with BCOE over the years. So, as a small district, we're by far, this, by far, the smallest unit district in the county. Next being Fillmore, 3,800 or so. So we have to depend on that kind of thing, right? And, at 2,500 plus students next year, there are certain things that become problematic. For example, and I'll tell you, this is where this future conversation might go. And I'm going to start out by telling you, I'm so far from advocating about what I'm going to say, but if you're really talking about differences in expenditures in a K-12 district, I'm talking about at each level. Okay, we've already talked about elementary, I'll leave that alone. The class sizes were 20 K through 3 when I came, then class size reduction left. They quickly went from 20 and 28 to 26 and 32, and now we're sliding back a little bit better, more in the 27 range, K6. Hopefully we can maintain that next year depending on what we do with the staffing, but at the junior high level, those classes, still are in the 32 to 33 range in the core subjects, okay? At the high school, and I shared this with you, and the good news is we're starting to work our way back toward, not where we were when I came, because actually I would say, that the requirement that every student take 6 classes was not the most positive thing that could have been done, the requirement. I think it should have been more on their own volition. But in any case, that's the way it was. And then for a couple of years, we relaxed that. Because the only way that you're going to save staffing in a high school is to have less student registrations. Either because you allow less, or you put some kind of limit on it. So I'm telling you that, Nordhoff only has about 31 full-time equivalent faculty. 31.
Hardly any.
31, okay?
Surprises me.
Okay, 31 for 750 kids. Now, the only way that you're going to save, you're not going to save anything in Matilla. They're just so tight because the kids take what they're told to take, except for the one classroom at the wheel. The only place where there's any discretion, the special education isn't discretionary, right? You do what you must do. The only place in the school district that truly is discretionary is at the high school. And the only way that you save any dollars is to limit the number of registrations. Therefore, limit the number of sections that you need to fund. Okay? And there has been a conscious effort, with which I agree, to try to maintain as much of the high school curriculum at 700 to 800 as existed at 1200, 1100, 1200. Now, we haven't done all of it. The biggest problem is if you do that, then the 30 teachers that you have must, by definition, teach more, each one must teach more courses, right? Instead of two preps, or 2.5 being the norm, you slide up to 3+. So I'm just telling you, that's the kind of tough, really tough choice that you would have to, if you're really thinking about cutting, and I'm not recommending it, and I think it would be a very poor decision relative to Nordhoff, that's really about the only place you can do it. So you just say, you may take the courses you need to be A to G.
That's it.
Plus 1, maybe, and that's what we're offering. And I don't recommend it, but that is the kind of marginal decision that you have to consider. And I think it stinks.
I mean, what would you say doing something like that?
Well, you could, not much, that's the point. I mean, let's say if you have 30, let's say you save 10%. You just save 3 teachers. Okay, there's your other $200,000.
So you're talking about you would be able to run the school academically with less teachers?
You could run, if I sat down with Greg and just said, okay, let's talk about your master schedule with 15 less sections. Okay, 15 less sections. Well, that's 450 less student elections, right? So 30 per class, 450 less, which is about about a half per kid. So, could you do it? Of course you could do it. But I think one of the whole points that we value is that the Nordhoff curriculum for, albeit a small high school compared to other high schools in the county, Nordhoff is still way larger than Villanova. It's way larger than any other school in this area. And we want to try to maintain that the richness of the curriculum to draw students to us. And I've reported to you about some recent trends that I think are pretty darn positive about what Nordhoff has done. They do everything possible in terms of going to Matilla and having all kinds of open houses and everything to try to have kids come. So, the construction of the staffing pattern with 30 at Nordhoff and 18 at Matilla and 46.6 at the elementary schools, and I won't tell you how many special ed people, okay, many of whom are classified. That's the composition plus our administrative team. That's it. Okay?
Well, in terms of those elected, I mean, you look at the dance program, I went to, I was blown away how many students are in that program. And Kim was telling me it'll be 30 more. Next year it'll be like 90 students involved in that.
Because, and just so you understand that, exactly.
Yeah, I love it.
30 more, love it, couldn't agree more. And those 30 predominantly, or a lot of them are coming from the change that we approved here in the physical education program, which then allowed us to reduce the amount of staff that we needed in PE. Okay, so it's pretty much a trade-off to doing dance instead of PE. So, you know, I'm just telling you, when you have 2,600 kids, and the kind of revenues that we've been talking about, I'm all for creativity, but I guarantee you, I'll just speak for myself, I haven't done anything more, I haven't worked on anything more than what we're talking about over the last 7 years. It's trying to figure out how to match the revenues and expenditures and staffing, and trying to figure out a way to have compensation be, competitive is not even the right word. Everything we could do, and as you know, we never could have even gotten to where we've gotten to, which is 83 cents on the dollar. If it hadn't been for all staff, everybody taking up to 8 furlough days several years. It's the only way it could have happened. So that's my monologue for tonight.
Thank you.
I do have one or two more questions in terms of, so, and just remind me, SELPA is special education
Local plan.
Okay, so our revenue projection is down for next year on SELPA. But we're increasing the staff by a specialist position and 2 new instructional aides.
Correct.
Correct.
Well, you know, yeah, but they're sort of different. I mean, SELPA.
The revenue from SELPA is the funding that we're receiving for special education that funds through the SELPA. Some comes directly to us, some funds through SELPA, which is run through the COE. However, that revenue that comes to us, one, that would be an area actually that is significantly impacted by not having a COLA. Special education costs not receiving the COLA means that revenue is remaining flat across the state for the year. At the county level, it's declining because the county as a whole is declining in enrollment, which means that we're also getting a smaller share. We're getting about the same share of a smaller pie. That's completely separate from what our actual needs are based on the identification of students with special needs when it comes to those instructional assistants. The staffing of the additional program specialists is, for the past few years, have had an absolute steal by having a retiree, Jackie Law, serve as the director of special education at a cost of about 1/3 of what a special ed director would be making if they were full-time with us. And she will be staying on this upcoming year, but we're providing this program specialist to provide some additional support to the department and helping offload some of what Jackie's been doing, because again, she's been paid 1/3 of what special ed directors do, but she's been performing every function and working, 4 or 5 days a week when she's supposed to be working 2.
I'm not saying we shouldn't.
No, but that's it. But they are actually they're both in special education, but they're 2 separate entities within special ed. All the stuff that you talked about at the end is local decision making, and the SELPA amount we get is determined by Sacramento and Camarillo.
Okay, and then my last question is in terms of textbooks, which is P on your notes. So I know one of the things you said is, well, we're not, this year we're purchasing math, so we will be doing that, so that expenditure goes down. But
right, and that was in the unrestricted, which is why you see such a stark contrast between 100,000 plus and the unrestricted.
Well, what about?
But I don't think we're not quite ready to say this is where we're going. All in.
Oh,
yeah, maybe next year.
And to clarify though, that would, the reason where something is located often is based on its funding source. So Common Core, we received funding that was, we're using unrestricted dollars for that purpose. At this time, we have restricted dollars, actually lottery revenue, about $100,000 a year that we receive for a very restricted purpose of textbooks, curriculum materials. And so if we were going to purchase, or whenever we do purchase those books, you won't see them in the same category that we purchase the math books in. Again, it's a funding as opposed to its proper expenditure categorization.
So what do we do now for Eli? Just tear outs and Xeroxes?
There's an awful lot of teacher initiative. We're going to be funding, I've received a request from Maryland and the elementary principals, certainly on behalf of the teachers, to create a dollar figure per student to go to the schools so that the individual teachers would have discretion and a budget to work with in order to generate materials. But it's like so much else in Common Core, do it and we'll get materials to you when we get to it. So Angie, I don't know, is that a fair, or Amy, I mean, we're working on it, but it's still and Alex, it's still in your hands, yeah, fair?
You were still using what we've used for, is it, we on 14?
There you go.
15?
We're going on 15 years, we're still using the same language arts program basically.
And then
supplementing
through teachers pay teachers and each other and the work that we do.
Fair to think that 17, 18 might be a year where for 17, 18, would be a year that we would go through, have an adoption or decide on the adoption?
Right, we're looking, right now, we're piloting next year.
Next year, right? So maybe for 17, so, and that would be a big line item for 17, 18.
Is that, you're able to teach so-called Common Core, notwithstanding it's 14 years old?
Well, Common Core is different. So, it's not, I don't know about you guys, but for me, I feel like what I'm doing with Common Core is, you want the kids to not, to articulate more of what they've read, to refer back to, like for English language or ELA, you want them to refer back into the textbook. I mean, so you can use the same work, but you have to, same materials, but you have to use it differently. Yeah, I mean, we're still, at least it's different for me, because I'm in kindergarten, so kindergarten is always
So we
pretty much
have most of the
very similar.
continuum
These guys
covered
could
there.
give you-
We got kindergarten, early grades,
I haven't used
upper
the
grades.
language arts program
Yeah, there you go.
forever. We have novels that we
Yeah,
There you go.
there you go.
just class sets of different books every year. I think teachers are just doing the best they can. The curriculum committee, because I happen to be on it, we're actually meeting next week. We're going to be visited by 3 publishers that we're looking at right now. One of them is the one that Ventura Unified went with for their adoption in National Geographic, and then the current Harcourt Brace, which is the publisher that we've had for the last 15 years. And we are going to be in the piloting phase for next year, and then hopefully coming back to the board with a recommendation of what we would like for the following year. So that would be the 17-18 school year. So yeah, we are definitely in desperate need to update those materials in the language arts area.
Thank you. So do we have any more questions for Andy? I mean, we can still email you and ask. Okay. Thank you so much for such a thorough discussion. This was a great discussion.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to 7.4.2. This is an action item. This is continuing our pay-as-you-go retirement strategy. Do we have any, do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move approval.
Do we have any discussion? Any questions?
I mean, the numbers are not in here. Is there any reason?
The actual
Yeah.
cost. So that,
I mean, I
the total
remember.
cost is, actually, I apologize for mentioning this, because this was a great piece of news that we got recently, was the cost due to a total of 10 employees aging out of the program, and only 3 coming in, a net savings of 7 staff. We're looking at a savings of about $100,000 for this upcoming year. It's in line on page 6 of 7 of your budget. It's the under employee benefits. The 3,700 object code, so that's the last item in the employee benefits, 579,580 for the 16-17 school year, and that is, like I said, I got 100,000 from the 680 it was in 15-16.
And basically, the question that's being posed to us is, are we going to pay the amount that we've been paying that we can afford to pay? Or are we going to pay millions of dollars that we don't have?
That's correct.
And so,
Let me think about that.
yeah.
The two options are, and we talked about this a couple months ago when we presented the requirement to give you the new valuation. The options are either we pre-fund a trust account that is able to pay down that liability, the future liability, but in order to do so, we'd have to have potentially more money than we're currently paying to do so. Or do we do what's the cheapest option in the present year, which is just keep paying pay-as-you-go each year.
Yeah, I just wondered if this, whatever requirement imposes this action item also requires, I remember we, at some meeting recently, we actually saw the actuarial valuation, which is what? It's a lot, right? And it's millions.
Laura, remember, was it the evaluation that we got, the GASB 45 report on post-retiree benefits?
Was
16 million, the outstanding liability, I think it's 16.
Yeah.
But I guess we don't have to put it in this particular.
No, so sometimes they will be done in the same meeting, we
Annual
pull them out
audit,
in separate meetings, but.
something thousand usually, annually, so that's the amount annually that they would want us to contribute to everything.
And I appreciate the point you made. As you may recall, as a young whippersnapper running for school board, I raised that when you soundly defeated me.
And then I supported you.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. All right, now, Saturday school analysis, and we have a speaker, Annika is going to speak about this. So, are you, yeah, you're still here. Yeah. Very good.
This is just really a request to help me, and I think that if it helps me, it might help other people. As I've been attending all these meetings and on my vertical learning curve about, how information is presented, and I see that we're facing these really, really challenging decisions that are going to be decided by really marginal differences, quite possibly. I want to ask for something that I'm more used to in private industries. When we look at data as data and not as a long narrative with numbers interspersed in all the words. And so I don't know if it's possible in the future when you're presenting data for comparison's sake to put it in a table, with rows and columns so we can kind of compare apples to apples. And I put it under Saturday school only because I was looking at this document which you're about to talk about. I thought I was going to talk after you talked about it. All of these numbers about the schools and how many kids came on what dates is interesting to me, but the absolute numbers aren't really meaningful to me. And what I really want to see is something that is more relative, that tells me a story that I can infer meaning from. Like, what is the absence rate at each school? I don't know what 59 kids at Myers Oaks means. Is that good? Is that bad? What's the target? What is the participation rate at Saturday school? What is the break-even point at Saturday school? I know you go into that at length in the narrative, but for me, being the way I am and the way my brain works, I want to see it in the table so I can kind of understand. And also as a PTA member, because we're the ones who can really drive Saturday school attendance, for example, just using this example. And what is our break-even point? When do we need to know how many kids are coming so we can say, forget it, it's a wash, let's not do it, we'll do it another week. Because maybe if we're only going to make $200, why bother? That kind of thing. I don't want to take the wind out of your sails because you're going to talk about this, but that's, as I heard you guys asking for all these requests, rolling into the budget meetings and things like that, I thought, because I feel like the last report on the 4 school models, I felt the similar kind of frustration where I was like, I need to see this in a table. And I don't know if anybody else's brain works that way, but that's my request. So if we can look at data as data rather than narrative, that would be helpful to me, and I hope it might be helpful to others. That's all.
Thank you. Okay, so Andy, you're going to talk about Saturday school. switching gears here.
Adding more tables. So again, this comes out of one of the other recommendations from the 7-Eleven committee, and I just want, this is a purely informational item, just to let the board know what we're currently doing, provide a little bit more context as to the requirements around Saturday school, and then I finalize this just to give you an idea of the excitement that I've heard from the principals in this renewed emphasis or focus on Saturday school, and that there is a commitment by the principals to build upon what's occurring this year, and that we will certainly be offering more Saturday school next year than this year. But I also wanted to give what my estimate would be of what the real upward ceiling is of potential new revenue coming from this source, to, again, potentially set some expectation. And I want to make sure also that I emphasize that this discussion, as I feel all too often my discussions is focused around the financial side of this. I don't make an effort to talk about the instructional benefits potentially for children to be able to come to a Saturday enrichment program. No question that exists. That just is not the context for my report tonight. But I didn't want to have that not stated. I realize that this is only a singular focus on the topic and not a complete robust one. So in order to have a Saturday school, the reason to have it fiscally is that it does allow us to recapture absences that a student may miss, and as a reminder, we're funded based on our average daily attendance, so each day of attendance means more revenue to us. In order to be able to recapture that attendance, we have to actually have the individual student who's attending Saturday school have an absence prior to their attendance. So we can't just state that across the district that we have, for instance, in here I included one stat that on average we have about 9 absences, 8 to 10 absences per student across the district. That's just basic math of a 95% attendance rate divided by 180 instructional days. The reality, however, is that we only, the median number of days missed is 5. We have 52% of our students miss 5 or fewer days, and well over a quarter of our students miss 3 or fewer days. So those students who are missing 5 or fewer days, let's just say we went to a 1 per month offering at Saturday school, they would actually, even if the timing worked out to be able to have the Saturday schools each occur after their absence, they still, if they only have 5 absences, wouldn't be able to help the district financially with their attendance during that 6th Saturday school. So important to note, again, it has to actually be the own student's absence that they're making up, and that absence has to occur prior to their attendance. So again, if a student is missing 4 days around spring break, then a Saturday school offered in the fall is not going to actually be a benefit for their attendance financially. The day itself must be the same minimum number of minutes required of an instructional day, and so because we typically offer Saturday school K-6, we use the longest duration, which is the 5th, 6th requirement for 4 hours. If there are kindergarten students there, they don't actually have to stay for the full 4 hours to collect the attendance on them. I gave you in the report the current year and prior year attendance days that were able to be made up. With the exception of Myers Oaks in 2015-16, my most recent event, we don't have the number of attendance days that were made up yet, and so I gave you the number of attending students. But the other numbers that are presented here are the actual attendance days made up and not the total number of students. So if someone happened to be at one of those events and saw that there was actually 80 students at Myers Oaks, that's very possible. We don't know how many, I don't know at the district level how many students actually attended. I only know how many attendance days are made up. I want to clarify that one as well. You can see that in 15-16, we had 3 of the 5 elementary schools take advantage of offering Saturday schools. Myers Oaks offering 2, Miramonte offering 2, and San Antonio 1. Do you guys have one more plan this year, or was that the only one?
That was it.
Okay, right. So that's the current offering. Like I said, I've spoken to all 4 principals. There is a commitment to build upon the program from this year, so I will absolutely have more than a total of 5 Saturday schools in the district next year. The requirements at the Saturday school are that we have to maintain the same maximum ratios of certificate staff to students, so we don't have the ability to staff a Saturday school purely with volunteers or purely with classified staff. It does require that we actually have certificate staff in the classroom, or if it's an outdoor activity that we're maintaining certificate staff, which could be our permanent staff, or it could be subs or hourly staff as well. Yeah, we would have that just as a regular instructional day.
I don't know that that's gonna happen.
That we are staffing with certificate staff. The reports I received from the principals is.
Yes?
Well, I don't mean now, I just mean in general, because now I think this is very clear.
Mhm.
But in terms of like the PTA, I never knew this information.
Yeah.
And I think it would, if it was like, I do, or we do, that's sort of what you're saying, it's like, and we're gonna make $200? Let's do something else, let's just sell snow cones in front of the school next Friday. It's a lot easier.
Can I interject?
Sure.
Putting on Saturday school is hard. It is so hard. First of all, you never know how many kids are going to show up because it's usually a sports day. And so the parents feel obligated to at least come, or at least partial attendance if they can do that. But the staffing is so difficult because we never know how many kids are going to come. Because we invite them all so that if the kid who has a bunch of absences has his friend coming, he's more likely to attend. So you just kind of have to be all inclusive. But the staffing is so difficult to do. Trying to make sure we have snacks because we're required to have a snack, provide a lunch kind of thing. It's a ton of work, and I dread it every week.
But you're excited about having more. There's your budget.
Excited. Excited isn't always a good thing.
Oh, okay. My head went positive.
It's really hard, and we're trying to be creative. I think Miramonte has something really cool going on tonight for the camp out, and Summit School's doing a field trip to Weir's Gorge. But even then, just then it's a field trip, and then we have to be with our drivers, we have to have insurance. It's like, oh my God, it's just tough.
Yeah.
We make it as hard as possible to implement.
Well, and I think this 40,000 is hopeful. I would be very
I
surprised.
knew you would say that. I predicted, told Andy you would say that.
I would be very surprised.
I know that there is a strong support group in the community, and so I want to make sure that I was giving a fair upward ceiling. I agree. I think that this is, I can say with certainty, or close to a 100% degree of certainty that this is the upward ceiling. I don't think I've under projected it, and so I figured again to make sure that I fairly represented it was better to err on being a little bit overestimated.
So for instance, this Miners Oaks on 12-5 with 59 students, how much did we earn from that side of it?
So when you net expenses, it's about $1,000.
And that school, I know in the past, this was years ago, obviously, once my kids have been at TOPA, that money was given discretionary to the principals. Is that still the case?
Correct. Yeah.
Since you're doing a lot of the work.
Right.
Right,
It
so
motivates the staff too to want to promote it with kids and to work Saturday school knowing that it goes back into programs in their school.
yeah, so the average, because again, not just do we have certificate staff, but we often will also supplement with either classified staff, or that's where PTO and PTA groups can also volunteer to provide some additional adult supervision and support. But when you net out the expenses of staffing and other costs, we're looking at roughly $500 to $1,000 of the net revenue that the smaller schools, San Antonio Summit, if Summit returns to offering them, what they bring in per event based on offering it currently at 2 times a year. No doubt that if we were to increase the offerings to 5 or 6, just mathematically, again, based on the fact that there'd be fewer students who have available absences to make up, and the reality that there's higher likelihood of conflicts, that I don't believe it's going to be a directly proportional increase. But right now, it's $500 to $1,000 at smaller schools, and $2,000, $2,500 is what we get at the larger schools. And so, total revenue to the district, net of expenses, this year at the 3 sites is $15,000 to $20,000. And my projection, if we were to increase the offerings, I think that the absolute highest that we could look at going would be 8 offerings or so in the school year per site. That would not be my recommendation.
That's a lot,
Certainly,
yeah.
that would be again.
That's a lot.
That would be.
How you feel about that back there? Or the principal could do it all by herself. You could teach everybody at the same time.
I actually see Charlie Hancock here, and I'm sure she would wanted to raise the fact that, I know you, well, hold on, I know you, Andy, you looked also into this issue of potentially hiring a vendor, right?
Yeah, I did. I received from Charlie and from a few other members of the community a resource of a group that does help put on Saturday schools. I called out to them as well as called one of the districts that they've worked with. The group that puts this on has great success, and I reading through the website was extremely excited and then very dejected quickly when speaking to them. Their experience is really working with districts of 10,088 or higher. 15 to 20,000 is more standard, and they're working in more urban areas that are with higher, I hate using this term, but unduplicated count pupils, and so they also are starting from baseline of a worse attendance rate as opposed to 95%. Compton Unified, for all sorts of reasons, is looking at something closer to a 91, 92% attendance rate, so they have more to build off of. When I did speak directly with the individuals who run the program, they said they did not see a way to have it financially viable to outsource it to them, that they would run our Saturday schools. What they said instead was that it'd be more likely they could do a train-the-trainer type program where they could help provide some support to our staff to help know how to run more effective outreach potentially to the community, to let them know about the events and how we can make sure that the offering on the Saturday school itself is enticing enough to get students to choose to, or families to choose to forego other Saturday options to attend a Saturday school. So they did offer that. There would certainly be a cost to that, but I did speak to the smallest district I've ever worked with was in this sort of setting, the train-the-trainer, Dixon Unified, a district about 3,700, and when I spoke to the assistant superintendent there, said, again, that they absolutely would not have been able to come in and have outsourced the program to them. That wasn't viable at their size, but that they did feel like there was some benefit, although it was duplicative a bit of some things they already were doing that they provide in that train-the-trainer context. He wasn't able to provide numbers, and the call we had as far as what increased revenue they received that they thought was directly tied to the training they received versus just offering more Saturday school.
Okay. Thank you. It's very helpful. This is all information we need to for our deliberations.
And then Charlie, did you want to say something?
I just have, I'm sorry, out of order, but could you go to a Saturday school in a different campus? Do you have to go to your resident campus? That would be one way to share those 8 dates, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And you can do that?
But when I was saying 8 dates, I was actually talking about 8 dates per site, which would be 40 total dates, which again, I was in no way recommending.
Thank you, Andy.
No way suggesting. I just, again, want to give a upward limit because in my conversations with the community, again, I've heard some recommend we should be having them at each school site once a month. And when you try to run those numbers, you see that that'd be a real challenge to have at each school site once a month. Now, every school offering it, rotating schools, but making sure we have a Saturday school offering each month, very possible. And yes, we could have students attend a different school site.
And is the subject matter limited? I mean, could a certificated teacher teach drama?
What do you guys do in practice?
Well, we usually try to make it a science Saturday, because the kids really like that, so we come up with science experiments, things you can do outdoors. And you have to make it stuff the kids are gonna want to come to.
Right.
So if you say it's a day of language arts and math.
The requirements are that this really is to be treated the same as a Monday through Friday school day.
That's the academic.
Right,
Yeah, it has to be
exactly.
academic,
It's supposed to be a
so,
Monday through Friday school day,
Sometimes
but.
it's a little bit of a stretch, but yeah, we find the academics.
Well, we put in some PE there, we had donuts and dodgeball. You help put that on.
Eat the donuts and run out of them.
So our theme this Saturday is the great outdoors, so we've got all kinds of math lessons happening, outdoor stuff. It's great.
Lynn, I have a question too. Andy,
Charlie, did you want this?
Well, my question was just if you could combine
No.
and make a group effort, so you're not doing it every month at the same school, and then if you have friends from different schools, they're gonna be excited to go hang out with their friends.
We become very competitive.
What
Typically.
we've discovered is it's really hard to predict how many kids are going to come. And if if you ask parents to RSVP, that doesn't work real well. People tend to not go at all then. So, you know, we've left it pretty open. I know I need about 3 teachers, and their classes could range from, you know, 12 to 35 potentially. So I always try to have 3 teachers and 3 instructional aides and as many parent volunteers as possible. If we just prepare for a lot, we usually have lots of extra. But, yeah, it's really hard. For years, we tried the RSVP model, and that just didn't work. So now it's just, come. If you need to come late, come. If you need to leave early, we'll accommodate you. Just get here.
Never got a GED, show up.
You know, you do have kids that will come that don't have an attendance day to make up, or you have siblings, you know, the parents are like, well, I can bring one, but I really need to bring both, and I'm like, okay, bring them both, then.
Is that at 9 a.m. this Saturday?
8:30.
So Annika, we could do inter-school dodgeball.
Hey.
Talk about being competitive, and the principals could be right in the front line.
That's right.
Just think how many kids you could bring out.
PTA Olympics.
So I had
The
maybe
parents.
this is actually more to the principals than Andy, but I still am not clear, and I realize probably most parents aren't, that there probably are ways. I don't know what the cutoff for ADA is in terms of, you know, if my kid has a doctor's appointment and we make the effort to have the kid at school for an hour and then take them off campus and then bring them back, or, you know, I mean, they're probably little subtle things that if people were reminded that we'll get the ADA if you do it this way rather than that way, you know, might be worth pointing out. I just don't know what those subtleties are, but.
Well, one thing I know for sure is you have to word that so carefully, because I've had parents go, you're only looking at my child with dollar signs in your eyes. And there have been some pretty upset parents.
Yes.
So, you just have to word things very carefully, and you have to tell them, please don't send your child if they're sick, this is just the optional personal days. And we do have families who just kind of go, well, Easter break was great, but we really need an extra 2 weeks because we are traveling out of the country. And so those are the ones that really kill us. It's just.
Right, but they're like, you can get certain circumstances, you can bring your homework or get your assignments and still have to be.
But you have to be absent for 5 days.
Okay, but I'm just saying it might be worthwhile as a school district, and we probably already do this, I'm just talking out loud, but talking usually is out loud, so.
Yeah.
On that topic really quick?
Yeah.
I agree with you, Kevin, 100%. Another thing that was brought up a little bit earlier that I think we could do a better job at communicating is the reduced lunch applications. I'll give you a personal example. My daughter, originally, when she first started going to school, we were doing the application, and she was getting her lunch there. She then decided, you know what, I like what mom does, so I want to take a lunch. So I, not knowing as a parent, have not filled out that application. Circumstances for me personally haven't changed since then, so if we were eligible back then, probably we're still eligible, yet we're missing out as a district because of not knowing that.
Right.
And so those sorts of things, I think we could do a better job of communicating it as a whole to the community, and I think that might help us move in a positive direction.
That would help a lot.
Yes, I think so.
That's big dollars right there.
Yeah.
Community stuff.
And it's just a matter of not knowing. I don't think it's the parents not wanting to cooperate, it's just not knowing.
Okay, thank you.
I was gonna say, is there a way to make the form just so that it doesn't just say, fill this out because you don't have enough money to pay for things, but fill it out because it helps us? Do you know what I mean?
We've done that. Suzanne
It still doesn't work.
has tried every which way, but I agree with Salvador. I mean, there are absolutely ways to remind people that's a great story. Just because if you're bringing lunch, you still qualify.
I think it starts at each individual school's
Oh,
PTA. And then
absolutely, it's through the principal PTA. No
And
question.
just to illustrate that, in the dialogues we had, Fame,
Go ahead.
and Hank, when you guys came to Miners Oaks,
Yeah.
and became, just the dialogue that was generated in our little community with our Spanish speakers, we enrolled a handful more free lunch, reduced lunch people, just in the context of having those conversations.
Great.
Right? So,
Good for you.
well, that's how we're learning as a PTA.
Thank you.
I will say Nordhoff did a terrific job in there. I think it was their March edition of the Ranger, of doing just what we're talking about. Of really spent a good amount of page space talking about the benefits of the district, of even if you're not needing to, even if your child's not buying from the school, to really help the district by completing this form.
Okay.
I had another thing to add to that. I know not a board didn't sign up, but doing it like you just said at a different time of the school year, as a parent, when I get all those forms at the beginning of the year, it's a little overwhelming.
It's too much, yeah.
And I think some of those things get overlooked. And I only wanted to say that just because it does equal revenue for our school district.
Yeah, spacing it out, that's a good point. Well, we're going to move on, all right, to item 7.5.1, and this is resolution ordering a regular governing board member election, ordering consolidation with other elections, and constituting specification of the election order to be held November 8th, 2016. This is an action item. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So this is a good time for me to apologize to Thane. Remember what Mitch McConnell said when he said, "I think I chose indelicate language"?
You were 100% accurate.
No, it was accurate, but it was indelicate.
And 7.5.2, Measure J implementation update.
I only have an hour to, This document is actually a document that numerous people in this room have seen. So I said to the board yesterday, or actually on Friday, on Friday that we were going to be working on this issue yesterday, and we had our long meeting with the OFT leadership, and so I actually ended up writing a pretty long memo last night, and then sent out again today. But basically, what this is, and it is almost 9 o'clock, so anybody who wants to read all the details of what we're planning for this summer, now that we are not doing almost $2 million of roof work, I mentioned that earlier, the focus this summer is twofold. One, to address a series of, I'll call them safety-related issues. We passed inspection, but there's still things that need significant work, and I'm not going to talk about grease interceptors and piping at 2 schools and other things like that, but that's the kind of work that does fall under Measure J. We know that the totality of these projects, that are a lot of small projects, some at each school, might fall somewhere in the $250,000 range, absent of whatever the soft costs are. The good news is those soft costs that are a third or so of that big $35 million will be less of a percentage here, because we don't need as much intervention from the construction management firm. We know that.
Are you saying that a third of the $35 million is going to be soft costs?
It was not quite third. A third, 26% of the $35 million. To go back to the original May 2014 document. Those are just projections. Okay. So anyway, but there's certain types of projects like these that do not require the same amount of intervention. So I can't give you a percent, but it's going to be way lower. That's number one. So this is all of these projects, whether we do all of them or not, these are the ones that we're contemplating. It's in that range of $250,000 to $300,000+ compared to $2 million of roofing, plus the projects that I talked to you about a week ago or so, where we're going to convene, depending, and this goes back to the conversation Annika was talking about, where Annika and Salvador and a group of parents said, we want to help, we want to participate, we want to volunteer, and there will be opportunities this summer, depending on how available everybody is, to work with Chuck and his group, both on grounds and maintenance, painting, et cetera, and experts we need to engage in order to be sure that we are appropriately insured and all those other things. Okay, how can I say? I've reached the point where I cannot drive past parts of schools anymore and see what they look like. Just can't, okay? And I don't even have to live there. So I can imagine what it's like for those of you who lived in these schools and look, well, the paint was chipping that badly 5 years ago, and now it's twice as bad. We're going to put together, my term was painting and other types of maintenance SWAT teams. And we're going to be absolutely vigilant and respectful of our classified union contract. But I just think there are ways to make this happen so when people come back in August, there will in fact be a different look. I mean, I'm just thinking, just one quick example. There was a time about 3 years ago when if you drove east on Ojai, east or west, doesn't matter, either way on Ojai Avenue, and you drove past Ojai Valley School, and you had, the white fence, right? Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful until you hit the margin between Ojai Valley School and Matilahat, and then you have chip paint. Okay, and somebody pointed out to me, I said, "You're absolutely right." We painted it. Now it looks like pretty much one uniform thing. Same thing happened. Chuck was great. We had some weeds that we just couldn't get to because we don't have the same kind of staffing. I'm sure that Ojai Valley School does. And now all the weeds are gone, both Ojai Valley School. Those are the kind of things that if you don't get to them now. So that's what we want to do this summer. I just wanted to inform you. Had a conversation, email conversation. I told you this before. Before we move to actually do these things, where there are contracts, they will be bid, and they will come to you. Okay, that's what's going to happen. But we got to move ahead, or else we won't do it this summer.
Yeah.
All right, and we were a little stalled there with the roofing, but I think we all agreed that we should be. That's my report.
Hank, quick question.
Yeah.
I couldn't find it. What does ROM stand for?
Rough order of magnitude.
Yeah,
It's giving you-
It's what?
Estimates.
Like a WAG.
It's a contract acronym.
Thank you.
You're right, good point.
So this will go on the website, this list?
I'll be happy to. Yeah.
I think that'd be good, because
Sure.
then community members can see that.
Oh, right,
And then they can make
we will
comments.
put out, right, and Dennis and I have conversed once, we actually were a little ahead of, Richard Jackson, if you remember Richard Jackson, he was here. He actually has walked the sites already. So we're going to be putting together from that walk essentially a summary of what we think the work is, and that's what will go out on the street.
I still struggle, Hank, with this Alfred Beatty participation in this, this paint and this piping, and I don't, this
I know you do.
$25,000 that we just paid them, it just eats me up. And I want us to try as much as we can not to use them.
We are, I promise. I will say to you, be straightforward, we would have been more successful in not using them if Josh hadn't left. That's a fact. Fact, absolutely. He had expertise beyond any facilities person I've worked with in 30 years to do this kind of stuff. So, I told you that when he left, and that's what I thought. I know you feel that way, and I agree, and I promise we'll do everything we can to mitigate their involvement.
I hope you also know I feel that.
I know you do, and I think everybody else does too.
Well, I have to say, it's knowing what we know about the state of our financial condition. It's just even $25,000 I see as a PO to Balfour Beatty, and we still haven't done it yet.
So, help me with that. What was the construction of that line, and what found its way into that line?
So that's that's actually a purchase order that was set up in the past couple of weeks to pay for their 2 invoices, to which are also listed under the payments of approximately $20,000, and then about $16,000, and then knowing that there may be another invoice coming before the end of June 30. So that's for all services rendered year.
The entire school year? Entire school year? Okay.
So I guess
So
the,
$25,000 is what we anticipate total billables being through June 30.
I mean, I totally agree. But the mitigating factor is that a lot of this was their work on the roof
Right.
analysis.
Yeah, that'll pay off.
Right.
I mean, we're gonna do the roofs.
Right. So this doesn't directly correlate to the painting.
No, and you can't,
Right.
no, gosh.
Yeah.
not at
I mean,
all.
I think that's the important
No,
point.
Not at all,
Yeah.
not at all. They haven't done it, they haven't billed us for it because they haven't done it yet.
Right.
So, and the fact is, we all, I promise, we understand how important it is to minimize those type of expenditures. I also have to tell you that there's certain kinds of work, like the piping and the grease intercepting, and doing work when we're reconstructing 2 classrooms at the high school because we have a special education program that has to be housed. You can't just go do that on your own or have volunteers.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't.
Has to
You
be done
just
to
can't.
specs, yeah.
So, I promise you, we have it front and center to minimize those expenditures, and I'm also telling you that I can't give you a dollar figure, but there would have been, in my opinion, tens of thousands of dollars saved every year that Josh was here. And And that's one of the reasons why I was interested in at least trying to see if we could find someone who could come work for us, and that's still on my agenda, who could come work for us on an hourly basis or something because it'd be a heck of a lot lower expenditure than that. Someone who's had experience managing major facilities projects to come work for us. So we're still thinking about it.
And also, isn't a lot of this current expense there working with the state architect?
Oh, DSA, absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact,
Not yet.
Are they though? Be honest, are they?
no, that's a different company.
Yeah,
No,
that's
this
Oh, okay,
is,
this is different,
Right.
not the
okay.
DSA.
But most of those, a lot of reason why the projects are on the list for this summer is because they don't need DSA approval.
Okay.
And it's mid-May, it's mid-May. Okay, that's my report.
So that's your superintendent's report also?
Well, I was about to say that, but you haven't done. That was quite slick.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay, since my report always, what do I always say? It always relates to the time of the hour.
right.
Since some of us have been here since 4 o'clock or so,
Yeah.
and it's now 5 hours later, I can't imagine there's anything that I would say that you would want to hear.
That my brain would even be able to absorb.
Therefore, that's my report. How'd I do, Chris? That pretty good?
Gosh. Where's where I'm
Thank you. Any items for future agendas?
I have a long list. No, nothing from me.
Well, I thought I would, I think this is the moment to bring to a head this whole question about the budget and what we, how we discuss it. I guess I'm thinking maybe sometime later in the summer, August or something, but I really, I thought the conversation we had was really helpful.
Very.
I mean, I think for our public especially, we talk about transparency, these are the conversations that are important, like where do we have opportunity to save money and where do we not? What's the difference between a restricted fund and a non-restricted fund? But beyond that, getting into just some of the details. I talked about, I think a year ago I called it granular.
Yes.
I'm looking for more granularity. I'm always more interested in granularity when it comes to how we spend our money in the district, because, if not there, if not then we just follow a template and we say this is how it is.
And there was a discussion earlier about sacred cows. What are those sacred cows? And,
Barbecue.
is it time? Yeah.
I don't know, I don't know what they are.
But when I look at our calendar, I think the fall tends to be pretty full with site plan and lots of stuff. But we're only meeting once.
You mean the
once a
single
month.
plan, the single plan?
Single plan.
Those are later though. Those really are November,
What's it?
December.
Okay.
to-
I said August.
to-
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I do just feel like we could have more than one meeting a month.
sure.
Yeah.
We should probably plan on, not 2 every month, but I'm just saying maybe three times a year or 4 times a year.
Yeah,
We
sure,
do
sure.
2.
Well, we've done that recently, and we're gonna have another one June, whatever, 13th, I guess that was. So, when there are major issues that require more time, one thing I could do granular, in terms of granular, is to show you the projected staffing, not just elementary, we talked a lot about that, but let me show you just how the junior high and high school lay out, okay? Because I'm telling you, that's where we spend our money. That's the staffing, okay? So when you take a look at that, you'll see how many students are being served in each section, in each grade, in each course.
Now, I don't want to violate the law, needless to say, but I also wonder where, now that we have Measure J money, where there might be opportunities where we used to take money out of the general fund and use it for maintenance, that we could, instead of doing maintenance, do something more infrastructure, but still accomplish similar purposes, and start to find some money in that way.
There is some, and I think when we go back to, it would have been, sort of June through August, September of 14, when John Ison came and he was talking about the relationship, of Measure J funds to the budget. And, you know, he and I got into an interesting debate about how much you can really save in the budget, because I think he was used to budgets that have more space, you know. But, for example, let's just take what we were just talking about. Okay, now, we're doing work at the schools this summer to make them what they should have been 10 years ago or 15 years ago. But if we didn't have the Measure J money, we probably wouldn't do it.
Because we don't have the money.
Because it's not a high enough priority compared to other $10,000 to $20,000 expenditures. So it's a little hard to measure. It's hard to measure exactly how much you save, because the only way you save it is if you had to do it and then you spent the Measure J money on it. So, it'll help, for sure.
You know,
Like the high school stage.
one thing that I would appreciate is if you could isolate out the unrestricted and discretionary items. I have trouble
Yeah, that's
pulling
easy.
them out,
It's
right?
easy not to know that.
And so even if it's a short list, which would be instructive, if I could see that separately, and then I can look at the cows and see, you know.
Right, well,
Are
like,
you including like textbooks in that? 'Cause
in other words,
Yes.
what's paid for by
Yes.
by restricted? What is paid for by restricted? Okay, in other, when we say restricted, you gave a couple of examples of staff development, right? So this is money that can only be spent there.
Right.
And on unrestricted, these are the categories where you may spend it.
Categories and how much we're spending now and what we're spending it on, right? Because that's our maneuvering room, is it not?
yes.
Okay, so I don't want to look at anything that I don't have any control over. It's just frustrating.
Well, that's gonna be a really short look. I wish you were otherwise. Oh, gosh.
So moving on to the consent calendar. This is our last item. We don't have our closed session tonight because
We don't need to.
they've been postponed, so
I'll move approval.
do we have a second?
Second?
So do you have any discussion about the consent calendar?
Brought up the Balfour Beatty thing, we discussed it.
Any, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, our meeting is adjourned.